and now are planning to incentivise refugees with £3,000 to get on the planes to Rwanda. So does the Attorney-General not now accept that the only way to stop the boats is to crush the trafficking gangs and prosecute the criminals?
The Honourable Gentleman was quite right. This is a major challenge this country faces. These are cruel people smuggling gangs who are exploiting people financially and emotionally, and they have to put an end to that. The Rwanda bill, of course, is going through the House. It's been through here. There'll be more opportunities for debate of that. But what he's really done, and I agree with him, is that he has underlined quite how important it is that we take action here, which is what we're doing.
SNP spokesperson Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister's flagship Rwanda bill was defeated 10 times in the House of Lords last week, with calls for the UK Government to protect victims of modern slavery and human trafficking from being removed to Rwanda without their consent until a decision based on conclusive grounds of their safety and not being placed at risk of being re-trafficked has been completed. Does the Minister not agree? Does he not understand that modern slavery protections for vulnerable children and adults by his government appear to be expendable?
Well, of course, the bill will be coming back to the Commons next week, I think, and there'll be opportunity to debate those issues further. But I would, of course, point out to the Honourable Lady at this point that the treaty between the Government of Rwanda and the UK includes specific provisions that address the need for protection and support for victims of trafficking.
Number 6, sir.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Colleagues who are regulars at Attorney-General's questions know that the Law Officers Convention prevents me from disclosing outside government whether or not I have provided advice and the specifics of that advice. But colleagues also know that I take very seriously my obligations to ensure that the government is acting in a lawful manner, both on the domestic and the international front.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've listened to the Attorney-General, and she will, of course, know, as one of the signatories to the Genocide Convention, the UK Government has a clear responsibility to not only punish, but also, under Article 1, to undertake to prevent genocide as one of the gravest crimes under international law. Given that the Government will still sell arms to the Israeli military after the International Court of Justice found the actions in Gaza to plausibly be in breach of the Genocide Convention, just what legal advice has she provided to the Foreign Office that allows her to fulfil this legal obligation to prevent genocide at the same time as selling arms? And does it not leave the UK complicit in genocide if the ICJ ultimately rule that it is genocide and it's proven that civilians were killed by UK-sold arms?
I believe I dealt with the substance of the Honourable Gentleman's question earlier, which is to say that we respect the independence of the ICJ. We have considerable concerns about this case, which is not helpful in the goal of achieving a sustainable ceasefire. And we accept that the court has made a provisional measures order, and much of that order we wholeheartedly agree with. We would, however, suggest that we do not bandy around terms such as genocide until there's been a final ruling of the court. The Honourable Gentleman from a sedentary position is asking what advice I've provided. I've explained very clearly why I cannot do that. However, with your leave, Mr Speaker, I would like to take him through some of the process that the FCDO goes through in order to make decisions which inform the business department on export licensing. The FCDO continues to assess Israel's commitment and capability to comply with IHL. The assessments are supported by a detailed evidence base, including analysis of the conflict, reporting from NGOs, international bodies and partner countries, statements from the Israeli government, military representative and Israel's track record. We've asked the government of Israel specific questions about its approach to complying with IHL. I did some of that myself to help inform that advice. The applications for export licences are assessed on a case-by-case basis against a strategic export licensing criteria, including with regard to IHL. That is a major part of that assessment. We keep licences under careful and continuing review, and the government is able to amend, suspend or refuse or revoke licences as circumstances require.
Thank you. We now come to business questions.
Thanks, guys.
We now come to business questions. I call the Shadow of the House, Lucy Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Leader would give us the forthcoming business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The business for the week commencing the 18th of March will include, on Monday the 18th of March, proceedings on the Supply and Appropriation Anticipation and Adjustments Bill, followed by consideration of Lord's amendments to the Safety of Rwanda Asylum and Immigration Bill. On Tuesday the 19th of March, remaining stages of the Trade Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership Bill Lords. Wednesday the 20th of March, second reading of the Post Office Horizon System Offences Bill. Thursday the 21st of March, general debate on the reports of the Defence Committee and the Committee of Public Accounts on Armed Forces Readiness and Defence Equipment, followed by a general debate on the reports of the Environmental Audit Committee, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, and Science, Innovation and Technology Committee on Food Security. The subjects for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee on the recommendation of the Liaison Committee. Friday the 22nd of March, private members' bills. The provisional business for the week commencing the 25th of March includes Monday the 25th of March, remaining stages of the Investigatory Powers Amendment Bill Lords, Tuesday the 26th of March, Committee of the Whole House and remaining stages of the Pedicabs London Bill Lords, followed by a debate on a motion relating to the National Policy Statement for National Networks. The House will rise for the Easter recess at the conclusion of business on Tuesday the 26th of March and return on Monday the 15th of April.
Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, may I pay tribute to Tommy McAvoy, the former member for Rutherglen. Tommy was a legend of the Labour Whip's office, in fact the longest ever serving government whip, highly respected and revered, and my thoughts are with his family and friends. Mr. Speaker, despite the King's speech only being a few months ago, the government seems to be running scared of its own legislative programme. So where have all their flagship bills gone? The Renters Reform Bill is being held to ransom, we hear, on the brink of collapse because the government won't stand up to landlords on their own side and end no-fault evictions. Second reading and committee stage happened in November, but nothing since. This is a manifesto commitment, so when will we get report stage? If they don't end no-fault evictions, then we will. The Prime Minister's own personal pledge to much fanfare for a smoke-free generation also seems to have gone up in smoke. Where is this bill? We've offered them Labour votes. They should take them. The Victim and Prisoners Bill is languishing in the Lords. Is that because the government don't want my right honourable friend, the member for Hull North's amendment on infected blood to be enacted? It's pretty shameful if so. Can she promise government support for the amended bill, and when will we finally see details of the compensation scheme? The sentencing bill is also stuck in limbo. We've been waiting for weeks for its committee stage. Is this another victim of this worn-out government? Apparently the Justice Secretary and the Prime Minister are at loggerheads over how to proceed, whilst this week the government sneaked out further plans to release criminals early because they've lost control of prison places. Isn't this exactly what members should be scrutinising during the passage of this bill? So will she bring it back? Much needed and long heralded legislation to regulate English football is still nowhere to be seen. Just this week, the Premier League shelved a new financial settlement for the football pyramid, and the English Football League are responding today. Doesn't she agree that new powers to impose a fair deal for smaller clubs can't come soon enough? Fans in Bury, Macclesfield, Derby, Reading, Scunthorpe, and may I add Portsmouth, want their precious clubs saved. If the Conservatives want to make this an election issue in these places, then I say bring it on. Because let's be really clear, if they don't want to regulate football governance, then we will. And I notice she's not announced any further provision beyond Monday for ping-pong on the emergency Rwanda legislation. Is that because it's now been pushed back to after Easter? Some emergency. To be honest, Mr Speaker, I don't want to hear as parliamentary time allows when there is an abundance of it. Do we really need time on the floor of the House for so many SIs or committee stage of the pedicabs bill? They've got the time, but on these issues and more, they don't have the support of their own side. It's as if they don't have the numbers. With every week that passes, their majority gets smaller and smaller. This week, it was another defection. But the reasons for their dwindling numbers does not make for pretty reading, Mr Speaker. In no particular order. Tractor porn, drug abuse, a conviction for paedophilia, breaking parliamentary rules on paid lobbying, groping, misleading Parliament, flashing at staff, tantrums because they weren't given peerages, eating camel penis. It might sound ridiculous, but it's actually not funny. It all brings Parliament into disrepute and drags our politics through the gutter. And now this week we have had overt racism from the Conservative Party's biggest donor. I had to check myself yesterday, Mr Speaker, that the Prime Minister really said that he was pleased. He was pleased that this man, who said a black woman MP should be shot and that Indians should climb on the roof of trains, supported his party. Is she pleased? And will she use his resources in her marginal Portsmouth North constituency? Surely, if he's a racist, which he clearly is, he has no place in the Conservative Party and they should give him his money back. The truth is, Mr Speaker, they can't implement their own legislative programme. They've lost control. And as the Right Honourable Member for Roxbourne said last night, the Conservative Party is unleadable. For the sake of the nation, it's better to go early than allow this psychodrama to continue. He's right, isn't he?
Can I start, Mr Speaker, by wishing all who are marking Ramadan in the UK and around the world a blessed Ramadan, and join with the tribute that the Honourable Lady paid to Tony McAvey, who I'm sure many members will be paying tribute to him in the coming days and weeks. And can I thank also my Right Honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, for her service and friendship over many years. This House may be losing her, but I know she has many more years of public service ahead of her. The Honourable Lady focuses firstly on the legislative programme. She will know that 26 bills have been introduced already in this session and 4 have reached royal assent. She will know that last session we did 43 bills and we broke many records in terms of private bills, for example, and the amount of legislation we were able to get through. She will know the passage of those bills that are going through both houses at the moment, and she will also know that we will shortly bring through the bill on football governance. It is a programme of work that we initiated. The review that was done with help from many clubs around the country has led to this. And of course, when we bring legislation to the House, it needs to have the confidence of the English Football League, and having attended many events with them myself, that is very clear, and I know that is understood. She refers to this side of the House as having no energy left for legislation or not bringing things forward, or that we are a zombie parliament. I'm afraid it is the opposition that is the zombies in this chamber. Yep. The House rises early when the opposition is not opposing. The the Finance Bill committee stage was done in 30 minutes. And in recent times, the opposition have found it hard to even find speakers for their own debates. It is they who are displaying zombie tendencies. It is often tempting, Mr. Speaker, to refer to the leader of the opposition as the Night of the Living Dead. In stark contrast, I would commend the always energetic and vibrant stance that my honourable friend, the member for Broxbourne, takes. I think the point that he was making in that interview is that the plan is working. In all seriousness, to come to the very serious issue that the Honourable Lady raises about Mr. Hester's remarks, they were racist and abhorrent, and I fully understand threatening to the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, who I understand has referred the matter to the police. My party is funded by fundraising and donations, notably raffles, donations from private individuals. There might be some, Mr. Speaker, that would come to this dispatch box today and attempt to argue that such a refund isn't practically possible or warranted, but I'm not going to attempt to do that. The point the Honourable Lady has made is not concerned with the practicalities of doing so, or the consequences to CCHQ's payroll, or the ability of my party to fight a general election. No, it is a point of principle, and I respect that. She could not have been clearer in what she has said today. She has stated that it is wrong to take funds from people who say horrible things, no matter when they were said. And when there is an issue, funds should be returned. She has been clear about that today, and she has said that that is the right thing to do. If, for example, someone has said of Hamas that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, as Dale Vince has said, or that I and my colleagues should be taken out and shot, as the RMT union boss Steve Headley has said, the Honourable Lady would presumably think it wrong to hang on to funds donated to Labour by an organisation branded, and I quote, as institutionally sexist. I think that under Tom Roche's time as GMB Secretary-General, running, and I quote, a casting couch culture menacing young women in the union, the Labour Party took 12 million quid from him. Those three charmers alone, Mr. Speaker, have contributed £15 million to the Labour Party, which presumably, immediately following this session, the Honourable Lady will demand is repaid. To be precise and to assist her in that matter, those donations were made directly to the Central Labour Party, Labour MPs, MSPs, councillors, the Mayor of Manchester, she might like to mention that this weekend, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party and the Leader of the Opposition. If Labour are sincere in this matter, and this is not a political stunt, they'll commit to repaying those funds. There would be some additional upsides to doing so too. The scurrilous suggestions that Labour's pro-stop oil policies were anything to do with Mr Vince's donations would no longer be able to be deployed. The charge that Labour were in the pockets of militant trade unions, and that's why they wouldn't support our legislation to protect public access to the services they pay for. But I'm not holding my breath, Mr Speaker, because I know that Labour say one thing and do another. They've dropped their £28 billion spending pledge on decarbonisation, yet they keep the policy. They say they won't tolerate pro-genocidal chants, yet they have restored the whip to the Honourable Member for Middlesbrough. They say they back our tax cuts, but they won't vote for them. And as a consequence, they can't now say how they'd fund NHS appointments, breakfast clubs, NHS equipment, dentistry appointments, home insulation, their own state-owned energy company, and their wealth fund. No amount of confected drama and virtue signalling can disguise the fact that it is the same old Labour Party, the same old hypocrisy and the same old games. This week, in the real world, outside the Westminster bubble, which is where we're focused, cancer deaths for middle-aged people are down by a third. Revised forecasts are showing the economy is growing. For the 8th month in a row, real wages are rising. Mr Speaker, the plan is working, unlike Labour's line of attack, and the Honourable Member for Broxbourne is very excited about it.
Father of the House.
Mr Speaker, it's good to hear inclusive politics. Can I ask the Leader of the House if before or after Easter there might be following consultations, a statement on inclusivity in Parliament. We rightly want to embrace and value difference and diversity, whether from a person's race, gender, other characteristics, background or experience. The word that's missing is sex. Over the last 5 years, those who are gender critical have raised all sorts of issues like the constant use of puberty blockers for children and the attack on the LGB alliance because they won't swallow what Stonewall and Mermaid persuaded many government departments and agencies to do, which is to disregard sex completely. While wanting to support trans people and make sure they have a life away from bigotry and fear, would it be possible for the House to examine its own policies on inclusiveness and try to make sure that the word sex is included along with the other characteristics for which people should not be discriminated against?
Leader of the House.
Well, my right honourable friend raises a very important point, and I know that there will be many members of the House of Commons Commission that will have heard what he has said today. This is a very important matter. When the government has put forward measures, for example, to protect single-sex spaces, which is very important and valued by many people in this country, we have also at the same time been reassuring about what that means for trans people and people who are living in a different gender. It is perfectly possible to do both, and I think that this House having a further examination on that and focus on that is a very good suggestion.
SNP spokesperson Deirdre Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I wish also everyone a happy Ramadan and pay my respects to the family of Tommy McAvoy. Well, here we are again, Mr. Speaker, trying to get answers to those sticky, inconvenient questions the leader doesn't want to and indeed never supplies. I'll begin with the dream that dares not speak its name here, but I will. Brexit. The Resolution Foundation tells us the UK's goods exports and imports have contracted by far more than any other G7 country, largely due to Brexit. Things are now so dire in Brexit land, even news of an uplift in GDP of just 0.2% is fallen upon by Brexiteers like starving pigeons on a crust of the stalest bread. Now, her party aims to shrink suffering public services even further, as evidenced in last week's budget. So shouldn't there be some discussion, a debate even, over the huge uplift in civil service jobs Brexit seems to have required since the EU referendum in 2016? And despite all the glorious promises of strengthened environmental protections in this freer, fairer and better off Britain, we are also seeing green policies abandoned right, left and centre by both Tory and Labour parties. A hapless minister even trying to tell us yesterday that building new gas-powered plants was good for the environment. Something I've seen suggested is supported by the Shadow Environment Minister too. Once again, Labour presenting one face down here, another entirely up in Scotland. Frustratingly, all these warning signs of Brexit impacts across a huge range of sectors come in bits and pieces. Surely what's needed is for her government to collate all of the impacts and present the result to the British people to properly judge whether it's a success or not. Can she help to facilitate that? There was a little good news this week, Mr. Speaker. There is hopefully to be some proper government redress for victims of the shocking Post Office Horizon scandal, although still no comfort for infected blood scandal victims. I met with the International Consortium of British Pensioners recently, and I fear another scandal is about to break on frozen pensions as well. There are so many scandals now it's hard to keep track. Something does not work in this place that so many can build up under successive governments of different political hues. And unfortunately, in closing, her party also distinguished itself once again this week by choosing money over morality with its grubby handling of the racist comments allegedly made about one of our colleagues in this House. A debate re-examining how parties are funded is called for at the very least. Now, the 7 Up series was recently deemed the most influential TV series of the last 50 years. Well, 14 years is well and truly up for this terrible government. But apparently we can't be put out of our Tory misery yet because their junior MPs here have debts and need the extra months to build up some reserves. Would she agree that's not much of an excuse?
Leader of the House.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, can I welcome her welcome of the Horizon bill. I hope that her party will be supporting it. She will know we will bring forward shortly measures to rectify the matter on infected blood. These were scandals that did not arise under this administration, but we have gripped these issues. The infected blood issue had been left for decades. We have investigated, we have set up inquiries, we are compensating the victims, and I hope that the House will support us in doing so on both matters. The Honourable Lady insinuates I dodge questions. I do not dodge questions. 6 weeks ago, the Honourable Lady said she would write to me with a list of all the questions I had not answered. She has not yet done so. But again, Mr. Speaker, the SNP never fails to disappoint. Asking a question today about sound administration and morality, or money over morality, in a week when it has been discovered that the Scottish Government have presided over a six-figure sum of Scottish taxpayers' money being spent on an art installation that promises, and I quote, a magical, erotic journey through a distinctly Scottish landscape, otherwise known to the rest of us as a hardcore porn movie. I'm glad the SNP are interested in good governance and improving administration, particularly with reference to Brexit. Let me see how I could help improve the Scottish Government effectiveness in that regard. There has been criticism this week that the SNP are blowing taxpayers' cash on copious embassies and EU lobbying to rejoin the EU. That camper van, Mr. Speaker, must be out of the police pound soon. Why not turn it into a mobile embassy and drive between Brussels and European capitals, lobbying for EU membership? Perhaps if the SNP also wanted to continue their funding of innovative film projects, they could double up and ask Cliff Richard to come with them and produce a sequel to Summer Holiday. And of course there would be the added bonus that it would also cut down the need for the SNP to blow more taxpayers' cash on overseas jollies. We are here to help, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Charles Walker.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much. I have a lot of time for the Honourable Lady from Manchester Central, but I need to clear my name.
Oh my goodness.
I strode across to Victoria Park yesterday to put my boot into my miserablest colleagues demanding an early general election. I said to Gary Gibbon, with incomes rising, inflation falling, the economy growing, the plan working. Why May the 2nd, Mr. Speaker? I am rolling up my sleeves to man the ramparts in November. But my question is, can we have an urgent debate on foot-in-mouth disease?
Foot-in-mouth or foot-and-mouth?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm very pleased the honourable gentleman was in the chamber today to set that record straight and request a debate on foot and mouth disease. I will, because of his energetic question, write to the Secretary of State and ask him to consider what the honourable gentleman has said. And for the rest of it, we thank him for it.
Chair of the Backbench Committee, Ian Mearns.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll declare an interest. I am a member of the Tyneside Irish Centre, which is very handily placed because of its proximity to St James's Park in Newcastle upon Tyne City Centre. And with that in mind, I would like to wish all members of the Irish diaspora a very happy St Patrick's Day on Sunday. Mr. Speaker, we're still open for business for applications for Westminster Hall debates, but we're a little disappointed that we haven't been allocated a little bit more time before the Easter recess for some chamber time. But please, for after the Easter recess, we would welcome applications for Westminster Hall debates on Tuesday mornings and Thursday afternoon. Mr. Speaker, the cost of childcare has been a significant barrier to work for many parents, and the increase in funded places would be more welcome, but it would seem with the first phase of the increase coming into effect in April, many parents are reporting difficulty in obtaining the promised funded places and very significant increases in costs for the non-funded elements. So can we have a debate in government time on the impact of the first phase of the scheme on accessibility and affordability, and whether the scheme as it currently stands will effectively remove the childcare barrier to work and fulfil its promise to parents?
Well, can I thank the honourable member for all the work that he is doing for his committee, and I hear his appeal for more time, and I will very soon be able to give him some information about that. With regard to our childcare policy, this is a priority for the Secretary of State. I will make sure that she has heard his concerns today. It is one of the many elements that we are bringing forward to enable people to remain economically active and to ensure that they're growing their household income. It's a very important service. That's why we have done it. It's an unprecedented generous package for parents, and we must ensure that all parents who want to have access to it can.
Nicky Aitken.
Here. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I hosted my second parliamentary drop-in for fertility treatment with the likes of Fertility Matters at Work, LGBT Mummies, UK Fertility Network and others. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's now time that we took the access to fertility treatment and ensuring that employers themselves provide time for people undertaking fertility treatment, time off work, and that we can have a debate in government time to discuss this very, very important subject?
Leave the House.
Well, can I thank, on behalf of all of us, for the Honourable Lady for all the work that she does in this very important matter. It is primarily an issue for the Department of Health and Social Care, but also some of the issues she raises will fall into the Department for Work and Pensions. So I shall make sure that both Secretaries of State have heard what she has said today. This is increasingly a concern and a very important matter to many couples, and we must ensure we are doing all we can to support them.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I press the Leader of the House again about the Football Governance Bill and how urgent it is? Many of us on both sides of the House have clubs in our constituencies that have been on the verge of going under, and that situation is only going to get worse. Could we bring the bill, the putative bill, to the floor of the House as soon as possible?
Yeah. Leader.
The Honourable Gentleman has my undertaking to do that. It's very important that we bring this bill forward. The football pyramid at every level needs to be supported. I know many honourable members will have had a great deal of input into it, and we must make sure that the bill is perfect when it comes to this House.
Anna Firth.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. During a recent visit to Eastwood Academy, an outstanding non-selective secondary school, which aims to help every child fulfil its potential, the head said to me that a Year 10 student had been removed from school mid-term in favour of elective home education. The student was doing incredibly well, came from a challenging background. He had only 10 days to try and engage with the parents, and they wouldn't even come into the school for a meeting. So please, can we have a debate in government time on the process by which children can suddenly be ripped out of school, and an assurance that when they are being electively home educated, they are getting the education they rightfully deserve.
Good point. Good point.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising this very important point? She will appreciate that these situations are often incredibly complicated. There are many factors involved, but it is important that we ensure that we know where children are and what education that they are getting, and that we can, particularly after the pandemic, that we can ensure that all children are getting access to a good education. My honourable friend, the member for Meon Valley, introduced the Children Not in School Registered Support and Orders Bill on the 11th of December, and it has its second reading scheduled on Friday. And I hope we can ensure that this bill makes progress in this session. It is very important, and of course would not impede in any way on people that do want to home educate their children, and do, as many do, in a very good way indeed.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had a debate in Westminster Hall on the 12th of December on arms export licences for sales to Israel. On the same day, the 12th of December, the Foreign Secretary decided he was satisfied that there was good evidence to support a judgment that Israel is committed to comply with international humanitarian law. It is Liberal Democrat policy to have a presumption of denial for arms sales to countries on the most recent FCDO list of territories designated human rights priority countries. Could we have a debate in government time, please, on that list of human rights priority countries so that we might better interdict Iranian arms supplies to Hamas and to Hezbollah, but also look again at UK arms exports to Israel?
Yeah. Leader of the House.
Well, I will certainly make sure that the Department for Business and Trade, which is the department that has oversight on this matter, is aware of what the honourable gentleman has said today. Of course, this House scrutinises the policies and the procedures that surround arms export controls. We're very transparent. We have one of the most rigorous regimes in the world in that respect, and I'm sure that we would welcome further scrutiny of it, because I think it is a sound policy.
The Manchester.
Speaker, last week we saw a budget that delivered lower taxes and high economic growth, and it covered areas such as freezing fuel duty and supporting childcare through changes in child benefit, which areas like Gillingham and Rainham will benefit. However, there is a question I'd like to ask the Leader of the House to ask the Secretary of State for Levelling Up to make, and that is with regards to how those 20 town centres were chosen for levelling up and investment and regeneration. 20, because that statement needs to ask how that criteria was applied, because Gillingham, in my constituency, has not had any previous funding despite representations to the Secretary of State, and my constituents, like any other constituents, want to know how that criteria is applied and that decisions are made on a fair, transparent, open basis.
Well, can I thank firstly my honourable friend for being a champion for his constituents and in particular trying to get them levelling up funding. He will know that the processes that assess where funding is directed are independent from ministers, they are transparent in the criteria and they're grading for that. And he will also know that where people have not been successful, that department has quite often worked with local authorities and members of this House to improve the bids that they are putting forward. So I'd encourage him to go and talk to the Secretary of State, and I will make sure that he knows that the honourable gentleman has raised this today.
Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oldham is a wonderful place, but it is not without challenges, and I should say the local community is very concerned at the number of young people that are being drawn into gang activity and also who are at risk of child criminal exploitation. Figures over the last 2 years show that 312 young people have been identified as being at risk of exploitation. We've now got 5 Section 60 stop and searches in place over the last year as well because of the number of knife incidents that are taking place. Can I ask the Leader of the House, in government time, can we have a debate on what's being done in those urban areas where criminal exploitation, I'm afraid, is not being checked?
Leader of the House.
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this important matter and also encourage him, as I'm sure he has, to raise it with his local police crime commissioner. I will make sure the Home Secretary has heard what he has said today, but I would encourage him to address this with his local constabulary and the police crime commissioner.
Jonathan Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education is the bedrock to levelling up in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Tork, which is why since 2010 I've been delighted that now 92% of schools are rated good or outstanding, with Mill Hill Primary Academy in Littlechell and Stanfield Ward and Newford Academy in Smallthorne both recently having received the outstanding status. But sadly, Mr. Speaker, Labour's abysmal and dismal record looms large in Hornstoke-on-Trent thanks to their languishing 88 schools in a disastrous PFI debt deal, which has meant that recent hikes to the charges facing those schools could put staff's livelihoods at risk, as well as undermine the very fabric of what we're trying to do, which is turn the great education of our city around after Labour's abysmal failure. So will the Leader of the House assist me in securing an adjournment debate or a Westminster Hall debate so I can raise these matters directly with the relevant department in order to ensure that these 88 schools can and will be protected?
Leader of the House.
Well, first, can I congratulate my honourable friend and the teachers and parents and everyone who has worked in his constituency to improve education standards. That is very good news indeed. But I know, as a founder member of the No to PFI campaign, the legacy issues that many public organisations are dealing with, and I know that he has been a doughty campaigner on trying to get these matters resolved and ensuring that the commercial negotiations that need to take place to protect those public services and those working in them are properly underway. Given that education questions is not until the end of April, I will make sure that the Secretary of State has heard what he has said today, and also the Treasury, which has done much under our administration to try and rectify the damage these contracts has done. I will make sure that they have heard what he has said, and he will know how to apply for a debate.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, with the Horizon scandal, sub-postmasters are rightly being put at the centre of the government's response to that scandal. Last week, the leader told me that the Paymaster General was going to have a tour around the United Kingdom to meet all those infected and affected, or the groups of the infected and affected in the contaminated blood scandal. I've had a letter from the Paymaster General, which doesn't give me any more information. And also, all the groups are telling me that they've had no contact with the Paymaster General's office to organise that tour. It's 9 weeks until Sir Brian produces his final report on the infected blood inquiry. Is it possible to have a statement from the Paymaster General so we can all understand exactly what is happening and what this tour is going to do? Because a lot of people are concerned that it may be a delaying tactic, and what we all want to do is to get compensation to these people who've been infected and affected.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this again? In doing so, it sends a message to those that have been waiting far too long for redress, that they are at the forefront of our minds. I have met again this week with the Paymaster General. He is working and he is making good progress towards getting this resolved. I know this is frustrating for the Honourable Lady and all those involved with her all-party parliamentary group, but I know that the Paymaster General will come to this House at the first available opportunity to give an update on these matters. We are now moving towards the end of this process. What the Paymaster General has discussed with me has given me confidence in that respect, and he feels very strongly that he wants to meet with people directly. There will be more information coming out on that, but I do understand the Honourable Lady's impatience.
Rotten.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the House will know that I welcome the support the Government have given to pensioners with an 8.5 increase in pension in April and the triple lock remaining firmly in place. However, the tax threshold will consume much of the support that pensioners have been given, and the national insurance reduction has done nothing for pensioners. So, can I ask the Leader of the House to arrange an urgent debate on improving the quality of life for pensioners in the United Kingdom who have worked hard all their lives, contributed to our nation's success and deserve a high-quality retirement?
Well, I think that this government can be very proud of its record in this respect, and I remember when we came in 2010, the appalling maladministration of pension and tax credits that left many people trapped in poverty and misery. The triple lock and uprating of the state pension by 8.5% from April this year will protect pensioner incomes. The state pension has increased by £3,700 since 2010, and it's very important that we ensure that people are being lifted out of poverty and looked after at the moment in their life when their cost of living rises due to heating bills and other demands that are made on their purse as they age. The effect of that has been we have lifted 200,000 pensioners out of absolute poverty and improved the lives of many more. I think that is a record to be proud of, and I will make sure the issue is, that he raises is heard by the Secretary of State.
Owen Thompson.
This week we mark the start of the 40th anniversary of the miners' strikes of 1984-85, and tomorrow I will attempt to bring my miners' pardons bill forward in this place, and obviously would invite the leader to join me in supporting that bill. But beyond that, could we have arrangements for a debate in government time into the potential merits of a public inquiry into the political interference that took place at that time?
Leader of the House.
Well, congratulate the honourable gentleman for the advert for his bill tomorrow. I wish him well with it. And with regard to the further issue he raises, that would be a matter for the Cabinet Office. I understand why he makes the point, but I suspect it is not going to be on the list of the Cabinet Office priorities for a public inquiry.
Therese Villiers.
Can we have a debate on the shocking decision by Labour's Barnet Council to approve overdevelopment in Victoria Quarter in New Barnet and concreting over green fields in Whalebones in High Barnet? This is a disgraceful decision, and it just demonstrates the ominous situation in the terrible event Labour were to win power at the general election, because their leader wants to bulldoze over the green belt as well.
Leader of the House.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for yet again raising concerns that she has over particular developments in her area. She will know that we have worked hard to strike the right balance with ensuring that we are building to enable people to be able to have cost-effective housing and to achieve their ambitions of home ownership. She will know that the next levelling up and housing and communities questions is not until later in April, so I will make sure that this particular local issue the Honourable Lady is Right Honourable Lady is campaigning on is brought to the attention of the Secretary of State.
Richard Berger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to raise with the Leader of the House an absolutely shocking statistic. Research shows that more than 300,000 people died as a result of this government's austerity policies. And on top of those deaths, austerity has driven down wages, caused the economy to stagnate, and ripped the heart out of so many public services that our communities rely upon. Yet despite this, the government plans £20 billion worth more of cuts. So can we have an urgent debate on the specific issue of the damage caused by austerity economics and why they need to be ditched once and for all?
I thank the honourable gentleman for the opportunity to remind him of the state of the country when we took office in 2010. Youth unemployment running at 45%, 400,000 more children than there are today in absolute poverty, 200,000 more pensioners than there are today in absolute poverty. In my constituency, my hospital was in the top 5 for those with MRSA infections. We had crumbling school buildings. The Labour Party's Building Schools for the Future programme hadn't actually done any work, and secondary schools were excluded from it. I could go on. The honourable gentleman also points to the fact that Labour, if they got in, would repeat that exercise as well. Currently, they are unable in their spending plans to afford NHS appointments, breakfast clubs, NHS equipment, dentistry appointments, home insulation, the job bonus, their plans on wealth funds, or their plans on a state-owned energy company. We have brought back sound money. It is the Labour Party that doesn't understand that. And so if he really wants to complain about what we had to do to get this country back on track, he should look to his own party and their behaviour pre-2010.
Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst the shambolic Labour leadership at Kirklees Council are busy fighting amongst themselves with resignations, sackings and the jailing of a Labour councillor for perverting the course of justice, can we have a debate on all the millions of pounds of government investment that's flowing into the Colne and Home Valleys and Lindley, a brand new A&E unit, the multi-billion-pound Trans-Pennine Rail upgrade, the West Yorkshire Investment Zone, boosting the University of Huddersfield's National Health Innovation Campus, £100 million of levelling up cash for the indoor market, the Penistone Line upgrade and Marsden Mills, and a £30 million teaching block at Greenhead College, and there is much, much more.
Leader of the House.
Can I thank and congratulate my honourable friend for listing the considerable achievements that he and his local community have been able to achieve. It is a great track record and one to be very proud of. And I would say that it sits in stark contrast to what has become a distinctive feature of Labour-run councils. In Birmingham, bankruptcy; in Liverpool, police investigations on corruption; and Sandwell, saved from complete failure by government intervention; and Labour's vote-rigging legacy in Tower Hamlets is still causing havoc for residents.
Patricia Gibson.
Deputy Speaker, the Scottish Government has built more affordable homes than any other country in the United Kingdom, 126,000 over the last 17 years. Meanwhile, there has been a staggering 76% fall in affordable housing alone in London this financial year. Will the Leader of the House make a statement setting out her response to comments from housing charity Crisis, which said that the UK Government's 3-year freeze on local housing allowance is one of the biggest drivers of homelessness?
Leader of the House.
The honourable lady asks, I will deliver. I'll make a statement now. The Mayor of London's record on home building, crime and on supporting small businesses and charities is a shambles, and he should be voted out of office.
Andrew Saloon.
We build thousands of new homes to make sure that people are decently and affordably housed, as we're doing in my constituency. We also put thousands of extra motorists onto the existing road network. The A505 between Leighton Buzzard and Dunstable has seen 4 fatalities in 6 years and 50 accidents, and Bedford Road and Houghton Regis is not safe. So what can we do to make sure we recognise the impact on the existing road network when we build thousands of these new homes?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend again for his work on ensuring that what developments take place in his constituency are matched by investments in infrastructure and services, whether it is healthcare, which he has campaigned on enormously, but also transport as well, which he raises again today. I will make sure that the Secretary of State for Transport has heard what the honourable gentleman has said. He can raise it with him directly on the 21st of March, and I congratulate him because this is a very, very important aspect of ensuring that as developments progress, there are the services that his community needs.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The greater the scandal, the greater the obligation on us to act with speed and clarity to provide remedies. Notwithstanding yesterday's welcome news on the Horizon Scandal bill, we haven't acted fast enough, and now we're not acting with enough clarity, because the Department for Business and Trade is more than a fortnight late in providing the explanatory memorandum for its supplementary estimates. No other department has missed the deadline, only the Department for Business and Trade. Now, we cannot see where the budget might lie for remedies and redress for the GLO litigants whose heroic tenacity actually allowed us to overturn the convictions that the bill proposes. So, can the leader join me in urging the department to provide that explanatory memorandum quickly? And if not, can we have a debate in government time to get to the bottom on what on earth is going on?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for the right honourable gentleman for raising this matter. I will certainly make sure that the department has heard what he has said and that this House is presented with papers in good time to be able to scrutinise that legislation. He will know the complex issues that surround this bill and the work that has gone on to ensure that the bill is brought to the House in the best form possible that it can make swift passage through this House. And I know that there is concurrent activity to ensure that what it enables is ready to be implemented once it leaves this House and gains royal assent. He raises an important matter, and I will make sure the department has heard what he has said.
Wendy Morton.
Speaker, last Friday on International Women's Day, I had a fantastic time celebrating Let Girls Play, the girls' biggest football day in my constituency, when schools, including Castlefort, JMI, Pelsall Village, Riders Hayes, St John's, St Anne's, and Streatley Manor Primary all came together. Will my right honourable friend join me in thanking Walsall Football Club Foundation, including Swifty the mascot, and Streatley Academy, and everyone who was involved in organising this day and hopefully encouraging and inspiring the next generation of lionesses.
Probably debate. Well, can I congratulate my right honourable friend for all the work she has done and join her in her thanks and praise for Walsall Football Club, Walsall Football Foundation, Swifty the mascot, and everyone involved in it. The proof of focus in this area is in the statistics, and the BBC recently analysed the uptake in women playing the national game, and there are now twice as many registered female football teams in England as there were just 7 years ago, and I think that is a tremendous thing to celebrate.
Claire Hannah.
Thank you very much. Members will know that the Shared Prosperity Fund was initially a replacement for EU funds and a poor imitation in the view of many. Despite Northern Ireland having the highest levels of economic inactivity and the lowest proportional spend of SPF, money allocated to that fund has in fact been repurposed into last month's dormant deal and effectively rated to fund vital services. Will the Leader of the House allow for a debate in government time to discuss that fund and how money can be returned properly to levelling up and to supporting employability for carers, for the long-term unemployed, for vulnerable young people and for people living with a disability in Northern Ireland?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises a very important point, and the opportunity to speak directly to the Secretary of State, the dispatch box, is not until the 24th of April, so I will make sure that he has heard her concerns today.
Sir Michael Ellis.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Labour demand that because of a racist comment made 5 years ago, a large donation to the Conservatives should be returned. But does my right honourable friend recall that the head of the Public and Commercial Services Union, PCS, said 6 years ago, quote, Israel created the anti-Semitism row in the Labour Party, end quote. The Board of Deputies said at the time that it was anti-Semitic. However, Sorotka was subsequently elected president of the whole TUC. Now, applying the same standards, shouldn't Labour return the tens of millions that they have received from trade union donations?
Well, my right honourable friend has provided yet another example to add to the three that I gave earlier in this session. So it's £15 million and rising, and we wait to see what the Honourable Lady opposite does.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can we have a debate about Ofcom's approach towards GB News and the alleged breaches, and found breaches, in fact, of the Broadcasting Code and its ownership? Isn't it time that we had a proper wide-ranging inquiry from Ofcom into whether or not Sir Paul Marshall, who has endorsed very right-wing and extreme views, is a fit and proper person to hold a broadcasting licence, and whether the editorial policy is actually in breach of the rules set down by this House?
Well, the honourable gentleman is an experienced parliamentarian and he will know how to secure a debate. The chairman of the Backbench Business Committee is smiling and wiggling his eyebrows at him along the bench. The work that Ofcom does is incredibly important. They have raised a number of concerns with that channel, but with particular broadcasters that are and presenters that are in it. They have not raised matters of concern with regard to the channel itself, but if the honourable gentleman wishes to explore these matters further, he knows what he can do.
Peter Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Working with Durham Police and Darlington Council Civic Enforcement, I have been shocked to learn of the widespread sale of illegal vapes, illicit tobacco, underage sales to children, and the grooming and entry of children into acting as agents for this organised crime akin to county lines. What work is government doing across DLUC, Health, Home Office and Justice to tackle this issue? And can my right honourable friend find time for a debate on this deeply troubling issue?
Leader of the House.
Well, my honourable friend will know how he can secure a debate, and things that could be discussed at that occasion would be the 30 million of new funding per year for enforcement agencies, including trading standards, HMRC and Border Force, to tackle the illicit market and underage sales. There is a new joint illicit tobacco strategy and a new illicit tobacco task force backed by 100 million of new funding over the next 5 years. This is a very important issue for government, and I welcome further scrutiny of it.
Gavin Newland.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With only 4 bank branches left in my constituency, I thought my days of moaning about branch closures were over. But on Tuesday, Lloyds informed me that they were closing the Bank of Scotland branches in Renfrew and Bridge-Arena. Renfrew is a growing town of 25,000, which will not have a single branch, and the village of Bridge-Arena, if we're doing anything without a car is different, will also not have a branch. So can we have a debate on local banking? Because for so many, that is now left to, albeit in simple terms, to the post office, whose reputation in the public, it's fair to say, is in the gutter.
Yeah. Well, these are important services for any community, and the Honourable Gentleman is right to raise concerns about what is happening in his constituency. It is fortunate that the Secretary of State for Levelling Up is on the benches. He has saved me the stamp to raise this matter with him, because his department has done a lot of work in ensuring that even though there might not be bricks and mortar there for banking services, that those services can be retained in local communities, including communities that are very isolated and rural. So I will, belt and braces, I will write to the Secretary of State and ask that his officials who have put together best practice in this area contact the Honourable Gentleman's office.
Tom Hunt.
When Mark Murphy was a presenter at BBC Radio Suffolk, I think it's fair to say we had a bit of a mixed relationship. He was probably the most robust questioner I've ever encountered. However, in last September, he took over as the CEO of Cancer Support Suffolk, and he has done an exceptional job with his team. I went in there last week, they made some changes. You don't need to be referred by the hospital to go in there to have a meeting, and also it supports family members, not just those with cancer. One of the things he raised to me, though, is that he thinks that there should be national screening for prostate cancer, and there should be a level playing field when it comes to all forms of cancer to make sure we catch it early, work with some hard-to-reach communities to raise awareness as well. Will the Leader of the House support me in this campaign and also recognise the work that Mark Murphy's done and how it actually could save lives in Suffolk?
Well, can I first of all add my thanks and congratulations to the Honourable Gentleman for those individuals who have done so much to improve services and patient experience in his area. We have had some good news on cancer outcomes today, and that is very welcome, and it is because of those people, their attention to detail and their efforts that those achievements have been secured. He will know that diagnostics are absolutely critical to ensuring that people have good outcomes. That is why we have invested so much in the new 160 diagnostic test centres in a whole raft of therapy areas across the country. I will make sure that the Secretary of State for Health has heard his particular interest in this area, and we now obviously have new opportunities to use data that the Department of Health is collecting to ensure that we improve patient outcomes everywhere.
Yvonne Favard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week I visited Zealandia UK, and besides showing me their range of products, I had a Zoom call with their managing director of their Ukrainian factory, who set up Bake for Ukraine, a project that helps bring fresh bread to local people by sending decommissioned commercial bakery equipment from the UK, converted and given to small bakeries in local villages. Tesco already contribute to the scheme, but could the Leader of the House suggest how this scheme can be promoted to all colleagues to encourage more companies to contribute and raise awareness of this wonderful project?
Yeah. Well, in addition to asking a question, the Honourable Lady has provided her own answer by sharing with us this very impressive scheme, which shows the power of business as a force for good in the world. It will be in Hansard. I hope that media will pick it up, and I'm sure that everyone in this chamber will do their best to promote the scheme.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In recent weeks, I've been working with Sky News on their investigation into the purchase and misuse of catapults, sadly all too often by children and young people, to kill and maim wildlife and pets, and then all too often videos are shared on social media through channels such as WhatsApp. Can we have a statement from the Home Secretary on introducing criminal sanction for the irresponsible sale and use of catapults to kill and damage wildlife?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for all the work that he is continuing to do on matters such as this, but also in other areas of animal welfare. He will know that Home Office questions is not until the 15th of April, so I will make the Home Secretary aware of what he has said today. This is a disturbing and growing phenomenon, and in addition to causing animal suffering, it also, as we now know, is an indicator of what those perpetrators might go on to do and other crimes that they might commit. It's a serious matter, and I thank the honourable gentleman for raising it.
Alison Thulis.
Deputy Speaker, can we have a debate in government time on the urgent need for an employment bill, particularly to protect those on very precarious app-based contracts? I have had several taxi drivers who have been off-boarded by Uber and Just Eat, delivery drivers as well as taxi drivers, but they don't seem to have any recourse to complain when this happens to them, despite it affecting their employment prospects and their incomes. The government needs to do an awful lot more to protect people in these circumstances.
Well, I will make sure that the Department has heard the honourable lady's concerns. We have had labour market statistics out today, and in addition to the good news on wage growth as people progress through work, since 2010 unemployment has halved, absolute poverty has gone down, and there are 800 people more. There are 800 more people in jobs for every single day that we have been in office.
Philip Hoddebone.
Speaker, I bring good news from Kettering, because Kettering has made it into the top 10 of the most dog-loving places in the UK. A study by pet insurer Waggle has found that in Kettering, for every 1,000 people, there were 252 of our furry friends. With so many local green spaces and countryside where residents can take their dog for a walk, such as the hugely popular Wicksteed Park, it's clear that Kettering is a great place to own and love a dog. So may we have a statement from my right honourable friend, the Leader of the House, celebrating Kettering as one of the most dog-friendly places in the whole country?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for bringing us that good news that we all were hoping for and anticipating, that there are more waggy tails per square mile in Kettering than anywhere else in the UK. And I would encourage local authorities and communities to look to the example that has been set by Kettering, and give my congratulations for everyone who has made it such a dog-friendly place.
Mike Amesbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Parents from the Northwich part of my constituency are rightfully lobbying me about specialist educational provision in the Cheshire West and Chester area. Could we have a debate in government time about the sufficiency of resources given to councils and powers to deal with education and health partners in this field, special educational needs? Thank you.
Well, the honourable gentleman raises a very important matter, and he will know that this is not just a priority for the Secretary of State for Education, but something very personal to her and something that she has a particular personal interest in and focus on. We have increased funding available for special education needs. We have invested also in specialist schools, but I will make sure that the Secretary of State is aware of his concerns, as the next education questions is not until the end of April.
Simon Baines.
Madam Deputy Speaker, would my right honourable friend make time for additional debate on farming, and would she agree with me that the Prime Minister's recent announcement of £220 million to deploy new technology to boost productivity in the farming sector in North Shropshire and the rest of England compares very favourably with Welsh Labour's policy, which would force farmers in Clwyd South and the rest of Wales to reduce their productive land by 20%, resulting in a reduction of 122,200 in Welsh livestock numbers, 5,500 jobs being lost, and £199 million loss to Wales's economy, all of which has led to mass protests by the farming community throughout Wales.
Well, can I commend my honourable friend and the farmers that he represents for all the work that they are doing to fight against these plans. He is right, it will cost jobs. It is an appalling use of good agricultural land, and that's why just 3% of the farming community trust the Welsh government, and 87% of farmers believe that that misguided farming policy would not benefit their work or their business, or very importantly, deliver a positive outcome with regard to the environment. I think Labour in Wales need to start listening to farmers.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite consistently delivering some of the highest economic growth in the country, North West Leicestershire remains currently without access to the rail network, leaving my constituents completely reliant on their own vehicles, taxis or the local bus services. Will the Leader of the House join me in commending the 1,000 North West Leicestershire residents who signed a petition for the reinstatement of the original routes for the number 16, number 29 and number 29A bus services administered by Arriva East Midlands? Madam Deputy Speaker, these bus services are essential for my constituents, so can we have a Minister to give a statement as to why bus services continue to be curtailed when North West Leicestershire is making such an ongoing, massive contribution to the UK economy?
Well, I thank all of his constituents and the businesses in his constituency for what they are doing to grow our economy and to strengthen their own community. The next questions to the Secretary of State will be on the 21st of March, and I would encourage the honourable gentleman to raise it directly with the Secretary of State.
Holly Mumby-Croft.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I recently visited our local Sea Cadets in Scunthorpe to see their new and improved facilities which have been backed by government funding. It is always possible to recognise a serving or former cadet by their manners, their common sense and their can-do approach. And I was incredibly proud to meet 3 former Scunthorpe cadets who've gone on to serve our country as Royal Marine Commandos. Will she join me in commending our fantastic cadet leaders and our local young cadets who we're incredibly proud of? And would she support a debate on how we can continue to support cadets in the very genuine and positive contribution they make to our society?
Well, as the honourable lady was asking her question, there were audible noises of support from around the chamber. I think we all appreciate the work that the Sea Cadets do, as well as being a fantastic escalator of talent and giving young people opportunities and confidence. They also do a huge amount for their local communities, and we would all join with the sentiments that the honourable lady has given us today. We have done a huge amount to expand access to cadets and not just Sea Cadets but other cadets as well, in supporting schools to set up their own branches, but there is always more to do, and her question today has reminded us of the benefits of that.
Stephen Bonnar.
All of us across the House appreciate the vital role played by local individuals and volunteer groups within our constituencies. One such group in my constituency is Friends Together, based in Coatbridge, which has been running for 7 years now and makes a real difference to the lives of 150 local people with additional support needs. I wonder if the Leader of the House will join me in welcoming the most thrilling news that these individuals are to be recognised by the Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes and of Malta. Liam Hackett will receive the Cross of Merit, Ina Hamill the Silver Medal, while Elaine McDermott, Patrick Allen, Yvonne Crowley and Elizabeth Locke will receive a bronze medal. This is truly outstanding, a recognition, and it is richly deserved. So I wonder if we could have a debate in government time about the importance of community volunteers right across the United Kingdom and the valuable work that they commit to us.
Well, it's a shame, Madam Deputy Speaker, that applause is not allowed in the House and would be out of order, because I think we would all want to give those individuals a round of applause. I would say from all of us, congratulations to all in Friends Together, and thank you for your service. And I hope that the Honourable Gentleman will be getting a copy of Hansard today for everyone that he has named. We appreciate all of them.
Bob Blackman.
Deputy Speaker, I'm sure my right honourable friend will join me in congratulating Conservative-run Harrow Council for exceeding the number of apprentices they've recruited this year. More than 50 young people have been given the opportunity to work across different departments, including 8 in our schools, and obviously this gives them the opportunity of building a career which they can do in public service. So will my right honourable friend find time in government time to have a debate on apprentices in public services, so we can congratulate those public services that are recruiting apprentices and shame those that don't?
Well, I do join with my honourable friend in congratulating his local authority for their achievements. I think we should all be proud of the fact that over the last few years we have created 5.7 million of such opportunities for young people, but also people at other stages in their life. It is a tremendous way people can progress or move career, gain new qualifications without getting into debt, and I send my congratulations to him and Harrow Council.
Michael Shanks.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by joining the tributes of the Speaker and the front bench to Tommy McAvoy, who represented my constituency of Rutherglen for 23 years and was a committed trade unionist in the community before. He was very much Rutherglen's man, and I think during the by-election, I don't know how many people said to me, "You don't need to worry." I knew Tommy well all those years ago. 14 years after he stopped being the MP, he was still remembered by so many constituents. I wonder if I could ask the Leader of the House about the subsidy scheme provided to support schools to come to this place. It's always wonderful to see schools visiting us, and as a former teacher of politics, being able to bring pupils to this place to see politics in action is incredibly important. My honourable friend, the member for Paisley and Renfrewshire North, has raised the issue of the subsidy already, and I want to just pick up the fact that although it's been increased for April, for many schools it still is not enough to support them to come to this place. And I wonder if there's been any analysis of how many schools have been prevented from visiting because of that, and if there might be some review of the categories, because all of Scotland's schools are in Category C, and it is particularly difficult to bring them here with the subsidy that's currently in place.
The honourable gentleman for raising this. As I have previously said, this is a matter that has been looked at by the Finance Committee, and they have gone into quite a lot of detail about who is coming here, what were the barriers for people to come here, what other options they have to access education resource that they might want. But clearly coming to this amazing UNESCO heritage site is very important to many people. I will make sure that the chair of the Finance Committee has heard what he has said. There are a number of House of Commons commissioners in the chamber today, and they will have heard what the honourable gentleman has said. The policy has been recently changed to be more favourable, but I know that all parties concerned keep it under review.
And Mark Horsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rugby's providing new housing at scales, yet the number of pharmacies in our town is falling, with closures in recent months leading to residents telling me about having to queue for over an hour to get a prescription. I'm aware of offers to set up new pharmacies, but they've been turned down by our Health and Wellbeing Board, who unbelievably say there is sufficient provision in our area. May we have a debate about how this process is managed?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the situation in the honourable gentleman's constituency, and it sounds a very serious situation indeed. It is the responsibility of local commissioners. They have an obligation to ensure that those services are available. And clearly, because of our initiatives such as Pharmacy First, it is doubly important because now many of these places do have authority to prescribe. I will make sure that the Secretary of State for Health has heard his concerns and ask the regional managers of NHS England to look at what is going on in his local community. It is not a level of service that is acceptable for his constituents.
Alan Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a company called Claim My Tax notified my constituents Margaret and Brian Broadley that they were due a £1,200 marriage tax allowance refund from HMRC. On seeing the paperwork, they believe their signatures have been fraudulently obtained by the company, and they notified HMRC accordingly. HMRC insists they did give permission, and they're going to continue to work with the company rather than directly with my constituents. Now, the government rightly talked about clamping down on the actions of such claims companies. So why is HMRC allowed to behave like this?
Well, I hope that we can swiftly resolve this situation for the honourable gentleman. If he would give me the details of the case following this business questions session, I will make sure that he speaks immediately to someone from HMRC who can resolve this. I'm sure he has tried to get this resolved himself. I'm here to assist him in doing so, and I hopefully we'll be able to sort this out for his constituents.
Dr. Luke Evans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the driving reasons I wanted to come to this House is because what I saw in the NHS. All too often when you wanted to create change, you'd be told you're too junior or this is the way it's always been done. That's why I was delighted to see that the productivity plan was brought forward with £3.4 billion being put towards it. Could we have a debate in government time when that plan is brought forward to make sure that simple things like cross-boundary results are shared, that we can have computers that can switch on and load up quickly, and we get rid of things like faxes and scanning in letters, because all of this takes about 10 to 15% of a clinician's time. That time could be better spent with patients. Yeah.
Well, I think that is a very good suggestion for a debate, and I hope that all members of the House would welcome the increase in funding for the NHS, £6 billion that was announced in the budget, roughly half of that going to these new improvement programmes. And in addition to assisting members of staff and clinicians working in the NHS, it also, we know, improves patient outcomes. Just to give you one statistic, when a nurse asks a doctor to attend a patient, in a large percentage of cases that is not done, yet if it is tracked by a handheld device and we can ensure that that visit happens or that cannula is changed, it increases those patient outcomes. It is vital, and it is the kind of thing that we need to be doing more of in our NHS so that the patients that are served by it get the treatment and care they deserve.
Peter Grant.
Mr. Speaker, H100 in methyl is making good progress towards delivering the biggest green hydrogen domestic heating network the world has ever seen. The government had promised that by March 2023 they'd have announced the successful applicant for an even more ambitious project somewhere in the UK, potentially providing green hydrogen heating to tens of thousands of homes. A year later, we've heard nothing. So can we have a statement to explain why the government is dragging its feet on this and jeopardising Leavenmouth status and Scotland's status as world leaders in this vital green hydrogen heating technology?
Well, the UK is a world leader in this area. I shall make sure that the Secretary of State has heard what he has said, given that the next questions are not until the 16th of April. But we have a good track record across the UK in this area, and I know that we will want to continue to do that.
Michael.
Speaker, I feel that the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has been robbed, Mr. Speaker, robbed of its time in this place. And last year the leader was kind enough to ensure that we had the full hour for oral questions for these important topics. So could I ask again, and we slid back to 40 minutes, could we please have the full hour to discuss our countryside, our fishermen, our farmers and the environment?
Very good.
The honourable gentleman is very diligent in ensuring that he has enough time and opportunity to scrutinise the particular department, and I understand why this is a priority for him and the constituency that he represents. He knows these are complicated, there's a complicated Rubik cube of how we divvy up time. I was very sympathetic to the case he made last time, and I will raise it with business managers.
Welcome along.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dudley Hospital workers contracted by Mighty have been striking for not receiving a lump sum COVID payment, which some directly employed NHS staff received for doing the same job. Mighty wants the taxpayer to cover these payments, despite being directly responsible for their employees. Will the Leader of the House join me in thanking Mighty workers for their work during the pandemic and encourage the Department of Health and Social Care to work with me to resolve this issue?
Yeah.
Well, I do join with what the Honourable Gentleman says in thanking them for all the work they did during the pandemic. And it is very important that we ensure that we're valuing all of our health and social care staff, no matter how they are employed and which sector that they sit in. The Department for Health and Social Care has decided to provide additional funding on this occasion to help deliver one-off payments eligible to staff and organisations employed by non-NHS businesses, and those organisations are able to apply for funding. We felt we ought to be doing our bit in respect of that. I know there are discussions ongoing about that, but I will ensure that the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care is aware of this particular situation to see what are the outstanding issues and ensure that people are taken care of and parity is there.
Final question, James.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The leader may have seen the news this week that Reading Football Club intends to sell its state-of-the-art Bearwood training ground as a precursor to what I hope will not be administration. Football fans across Berkshire and beyond are in despair at the state of some of the clubs in our beautiful game. I know the issue of football governance bill has already been raised this morning, and it can't come soon enough, but could the leader please use all of the levers at her disposal to ensure that when the bill does come, it has sufficient teeth and powers in there to ensure that owners who are not fit and proper cannot take control of these clubs, and also that those who do slip through the net are properly held to account?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to make that point. He is preaching to the choir, as I am a Portsmouth supporter, and I think that we must ensure that if we are going to do this, it is effective. I think it is unprecedented the amount of input a piece of legislation has had from so many people across the country who are fans of the game. The game would be nothing without its fans, and these clubs are treasured community assets. We need to take care of everyone in the football pyramid, and we will ensure when this bill comes to the House, it does exactly that.
That completes business questions. I'll let the front bench change over. Right, we come to the statement. I call the Secretary of State, Michael Gove.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And with your permission, I'd like to make a statement about the next steps that we are taking in the government's strategy to counter extremism and to build greater national resilience and social cohesion. The United Kingdom is a success story, a multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, stronger because of our diversity. But our democracy and our values of inclusivity and tolerance are under challenge from extremist groups which are radicalising our young people and driving greater polarisation within and between communities to further their own ends. In order to protect our democratic values and enhance social cohesion, it is important both to reinforce what we all have in common and to be clear and precise in identifying the dangers posed by extremism. As our new definition makes clear, extremism can lead to the radicalisation of individuals, deny people their full rights and opportunities, suppress freedom of expression, incite hatred, weaken social cohesion, and ultimately, it can lead to acts of terrorism. Most extremist materials and activities are not illegal and do not meet a terrorism or national security threshold. For example, Islamist and neo-Nazi groups in Britain are operating lawfully, but they advocate and work towards the replacement of democracy with an Islamist or Nazi society. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has been working with local authorities, civil society and faith groups, especially in those areas where social cohesion is most under strain, to de-escalate tensions and to explore the most constructive support that we can offer. From our engagement, we hear widespread unease over the safety and security of community organisations, political candidates and elected officials. Councillors have been threatened with violence. Council meetings have been disrupted. Council officers and elected members talk of walking a tightrope, terrified of inadvertently saying the wrong thing, of offending one side or another. Many choose to remain silent, to take no action. Mr. Speaker, such is the chilling effect of these extremist groups on our democracy. It is, of course, gravely concerning that the conflict in the Middle East is driving further polarisation. We've seen a terrible increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hate crime, as well as a very significant increase in radicalisation. Troublingly, there is also evidence that some Islamists and extreme right-wing groups and others who seek to tear our society apart are working together to maximise the reach of their message and cause. And that is why the work of civil society organisations such as the Community Security Trust and Tel Mama, as well as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, the educational charity Solutions Not Sides, and the Forum for Discussion of Israel and Palestine is so important. We've provided additional funding for the CST and Tel Mama to counter anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred, and we will do more. We will shortly establish a new fund to provide additional, direct and tangible support for grassroots organisations building bridges and fighting division. I wish to commend those doing so much to counter prejudice. In working with civil society, it's critically important that we do not, unwittingly or through ignorance, fund or otherwise support organisations or individuals who are themselves extremist. In the past, it has unfortunately been the case that extremist groups and actors have sought to present themselves as moderate voices, representative of majority or mainstream opinion. The government has had a definition of extremism since 2011. It has helped inform our prevent counter-terrorism work and was designed to assist the government in engagement. But in a considerable number of cases, organisations and individuals with views which are clearly extreme have nevertheless benefited from state engagement, endorsement and support, and furthermore have exploited that association to further their extremist agendas. Among the most significant was Shakil Beg, who was labelled an Islamist extremist by a judge. Mr Beg, an NHS chaplain and regular speaker at state schools, ran the Lewisham Islamic Centre and was on both the Metropolitan Police's Independent Advisory Group in Lewisham and Lewisham's Standing Advisory Committee on Religious Education. In 2016, Mr Beg sued the BBC when they described him, accurately, as an extremist. The judge in the case, Mr Justice Haddon Cave, conducted his own scrupulous research, identifying many occasions where Mr Beg had advocated extreme positions, including promoting and encouraging religious violence, by telling a Muslim audience that violence in support of Islam would constitute a man's greatest deed. Not only did Mr Justice Haddon Cave dismiss Mr Begg's claim, he drew specific attention to the danger of extremists exploiting sponsorship from state institutions. And he outlined the need for an updated and more precise definition of extremism to guide engagement by government and others. And we have since seen how figures of potential extremism concern have been able to work with the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police, co-opt charities, and indeed benefit from public funding. And we know from William Shawcross's excellent independent review of Prevent that such engagement has inadvertently provided a platform funding or legitimacy for groups or individuals who oppose our shared values. This apparent legitimising of their views can lead extremists of all ideologies to be emboldened and to exert greater influence. That's why today my department is publishing an updated, more precise and rigorous definition of extremism, alongside a set of cross-government engagement principles for use when engaging with external groups. There is also detailed guidance on what the definition does and does not capture. And we're also setting up a new counter-extremism centre of excellence in my department as a world-leading authority on best practice, data and research. Mr Speaker, our plans, drawn up in close collaboration with the Home Office, will enable the government to express more clearly than ever before which groups fall within the extremism definition, and we can point to the evidence and explain the funding and engagement consequences. They will also support national efforts to counter the work of extremists who promote their ideologies both online and offline. The new definition will strengthen vital frontline counter-radicalisation work, and the new Centre of Excellence will also help us to understand the role played by state actors and state-linked organisations in extremist activity which is taking place in our country. And the wider knowledge of what constitutes extremist behaviour and who is behind it will, I hope, help all of us to identify potential threats and to take steps to challenge and marginalise them. Critically, the rights that we enjoy in the United Kingdom extend to everyone. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion and belief, the rule of law, upholding democracy and equal rights, these are the cornerstones of our civilised society, which as a government, as a parliament, on every side of this House, we strive always to uphold. So let me be clear, our definition will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech. The government has taken every possible precaution to strike a balance in drawing up the new definition between protecting fundamental rights and safeguarding citizens. Our definition draws on the work of Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent reviewer of social cohesion, and Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, before his appointment to that post. The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights, or intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results. It is important to stress that we are in no way intending to restrict freedom of expression, religion or belief. But the government cannot be in a position where, unwittingly or not, we sponsor, subsidise or support in any way organisations and individuals opposed to the freedoms we hold dear. Across this House, I am sure that we would agree that organisations such as the British National Socialist Movement and Patriotic Alternative, who promote neo-Nazi ideology, argue for forced repatriation, a white ethno-state and the targeting of minority groups for intimidation, are precisely the type of groups about which we should be concerned and whose activities we will assess against the new definition. The activities of the extreme right wing are a growing worry. The targeting of both Muslim and Jewish communities and individuals by these groups is a profound concern requiring concerted action. And it is important, just as with our definition of extremism, to be precise in the use of language when discussing Islamism. Islamism should never be confused with Islam. Islam is a great faith, a religion of peace, which provides spiritual nourishment to millions, inspires countless acts of charity, and celebrates virtues of generosity, compassion, and kindness. Islamism is a totalitarian ideology which seeks to divide, calls for the establishment of an Islamic state governed by Sharia law, and seeks the overthrow of liberal democratic principles. It has its roots in the thinking of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, the founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, Abu al-Maududi, and the Muslim Brotherhood ideologue, Said Qutb. The Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood is, of course, Hamas. Organisations such as the Muslim Association of Britain, which is the British affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood, and other groups such as Cage and Mend, give rise to concern for their Islamist orientation and views. We will be holding these and other organisations to account to assess if they meet our definition of extremism, and will take action as appropriate. There are, of course, further steps that we will take in the coming days and weeks to marginalise extremist groups and to support and strengthen those communities where extremists are most active and spreading division. This will include responding to Dame Sarah Khan's forthcoming report on social cohesion and democratic resilience, and Lord Walney's independent review of how to counter political violence and disruption. In this debate, we must never forget about the experiences of victims of extremism who are targeted by extremist groups and the severe and distressing impact it has on their lives. So I'm pleased that Dame Sarah Khan will be addressing this in her forthcoming report. As the Prime Minister has said, the time has come for us all to stand together to combat the forces of division and to beat this poison. The liberties that we hold dear, and indeed the democratic principles we're all sent here to uphold, require us to counter and challenge the extremists who seek to intimidate, to coerce and to divide. We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united. I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for the advance sight of this statement and for his briefing yesterday. Hateful extremism threatens the safety of our communities and the unity of our country. Everyone across this House can agree that this is a serious problem which demands a serious response. So I want to begin by saying from the outset, when it comes to our national security, when it comes to the threat of radicalisation, when it comes to the toxic scourge of Islamophobia, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism or any other corrosive hatred, the whole House can and should work together. The way the government does this work matters, and the language that we all use is important. And I want to welcome the Secretary of State's opening words that it is our diversity and our values which make our country stronger. Indeed, the Secretary of State is right to raise the concerns about the dangers facing our elected representatives. We must be free to represent the views of our constituents. We all have a responsibility to work to extinguish the flames of division and never to fan them. While it may be part of the nature of our politics for passion to sometimes take centre stage, and while we may challenge and probe these plans today, if the Secretary of State wants to engage going forward, he has my word that we can do so in good faith. And the reason that I say challenge is because I do believe he's made a mistake in the way that this policy has been trailed in the last week. So I'm glad that he's now come to the House to give clarification. But it is not right that we have spent the last few days poring over a possible new definition in the papers. And it's not right that the department has leaked the names of groups that may or may not be covered by this definition when he rightly says this work should be based on due diligence. And it is not right that each stage of the recruitment of a new Islamophobia advisor has been mired in controversy. So can the Secretary of State confirm he has now appointed an advisor? So on today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, we will scrutinise this new definition, and it will be crucial to see the way it is applied in practice. But can I ask the Secretary of State to set out today how the new Centre of Excellence will operate and how it will be resourced? And can he confirm how this new definition will work in practice? How exactly will it restrict the government's engagement? And can he explain whether these restrictions will only relate to government engagement or later extended to other public bodies such as the police and universities? Given this new definition, the public will rightly be alarmed at the idea that government ministers could already have met with extremist groups. Can the Secretary of State shed some light on this? Renewed vigilance and diligence is welcome, particularly in the current climate, but if his own department now needs to cut ties with extremist groups, it begs the question why they were working with them in the first place. And given he says this will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech, can the Secretary of State explain which groups this new definition will affect and where the government has chosen to draw the line? Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that the government has identified this risk or promised to act. As the Secretary of State mentions in his opening, at the beginning of 2011, well back then, the Conservative Home Secretary told the House that if organisations do not support the values of democracy, human rights, equality before law, participation in society, we will not work with them and we will not fund them. It begs the question, why has it taken the government 13 years to address this? The Secretary of State says that organisations which are clearly extreme have benefited from government engagement, endorsement and support, and even suggests that those groups have exploited government engagement. Can he understand how deeply concerning this is to hear? He must explain exactly how this has been allowed to happen. Mr. Speaker, we know that there has been a huge surge in online extremism. And can the Secretary of State give assurance on how this will be dealt with? What action he is taking to work cross-government to assess and confront online hate? We know that extremism doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we need political leadership on this. But a quality of good leadership is to empower others. The Secretary of State says that the department has been working with faith groups, civil society and local councils, and I agree that they all have a crucial role to play in tackling extremism. But what form has that consultation taken, and will he publish the findings of that consultation? And on the wider work now needed, can the Secretary of State set out if this work will be underpinned by a new cross-government counter-extremism strategy, given the last one is now 9 years out of date? Will it include action to rebuild the resilience and cohesion of our communities? And he mentions new funding. How much will that funding be, and how will it be allocated? And how will it interact with other funding streams, including the multi-faith dialogue? Mr. Speaker, I also want to raise the point about hate crime and how important this is to tackling anti-extremism. We have seen an appalling surge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in recent months, and the previous strategy is now 4 years out of date. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when will he have an updated hate crime action plan? And have ministers abandoned plans to bring forward a new hate crime strategy? And can I ask the Minister, why is the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group and the Anti-Semitism Working Group no longer meeting? We need much stronger action to tackle the corrosive forms of hatred that devastate lives and corrode communities. But today's statement does not go far enough. And regardless of how workable and effective this new definition and centre of excellence is, this announcement will not be enough. I want to finish by echoing the words of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York and their warnings that against the backdrop of growing divisions, it's for political leaders to provide a conciliatory tone and to pursue policies that bring us together, not risk dividing us apart. I look forward to working with the Secretary of State on this.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for the constructive, detailed and consensual approach that she's taking to what are inevitably challenging and difficult issues. I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to her and other Labour colleagues yesterday. I look forward to working together in the future, and I know it is the role of the opposition to challenge, and the constructive way in which challenge has been issued today is something which I wholeheartedly welcome. Can I also say that I agree with the Shadow Secretary of State that the danger to elected representatives is growing, and it is something which my right honourable friend, the Security Minister, has invested time, care and money to counter. And can I also say, of course, passion, vigour, determination is part of the meat of our politics, and nothing in anything that we have said today should take away from our desire to see free speech exercised as energetically as possible. The Shadow Secretary of State mentioned the leaking of some information relating to our work on this. I deprecate that leaking. It is fundamentally a challenge to the effective operation of government, and a leak inquiry has been commissioned in order to see how some of the information about our statement today was shared. But, Mr. Speaker, there is an opportunity for all of us, as a result of my having given the statement, to scrutinise the detail. The Shadow Secretary of State talks about the Centre of Excellence, how it will be staffed, how it will be funded. Impartial civil servants with training in this area will be supplemented in their work by studies by academics and academic bodies. And of course we will work with the existing expertise in the Homeland Security Analysis and Intelligence Unit within the Home Office in order to ensure that all our work is rigorous. And we will make sure that if a decision is made to list an organisation as extremist, that we will show our working, as it were, that the evidence which leads us to that conclusion and the judgment that we have made will be there for everyone to see. The Shadow Secretary of State asked, of course, why it was the case that in the past, government or arms of the state had unwittingly involved themselves or been engaged with extremist organisations. It's because the definition, while well-intentioned and drawn up with care, was perhaps insufficiently precise and perhaps insufficiently policed, that we thought it was appropriate to update that definition. And this follows on, of course, from the Shakil Beg case, from William Shawcross's independent review of Prevent, and other examples that were brought to government's attention. And I think the real sin would be, having been told by independent figures, by the courts, and by William Shawcross, that we needed to look again at our approach. The real sin, I think, would have been not to, and to have stuck to a course which had led to mistakes in the past. And of course, the Shadow Secretary of State asks about wider work on resilience. We'll be publishing a more detailed action plan which will include funding commitments to support organisations on the ground which do build up a greater degree of community resilience, and I look forward to working with her and others in local government to achieve that valuable end.
Fire of the House, Sir Peter Bottom.
I'm glad to follow both the previous frontbench speakers, who I think have given a lead to the House. There's an interesting question. When, 90 years ago, would it have been right to identify Oswald Mosley and his approach, not just as politicians, but as people marching through streets to intimidate people, as a threat, and why it took so long more recently, when Catherine Stock was at Sussex, that the Students' Union and many others called her a dangerous extremist for writing a rather good book and having views which are now mainstream. It seems to me that filling in the gap between what's not necessarily criminal, but should be identified as wrong, is an important thing, and I hope the whole House can give support to the proposals today.
I'm very, very grateful to the Father of the House. There should rightly be a high bar on the use of criminal sanctions. We should seek to encourage free speech always, but he is quite right to draw attention to the freedom-restricting harassment that some have engaged in, and I completely endorse the point that he makes about Kathleen Stock, a distinguished academic.
SNP spokesperson Alison Poulos.
I would first like to wish Ramadan Mubarak to everybody who is marking this significant month in the Islamic calendar. Friday is also International Day to combat Islamophobia, but it's in this context that Muslims are afraid to speak out lest they be targeted for their beliefs or indeed labelled extremists themselves. The government's independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall, has said that these proposals by the government could undermine the UK's reputation because it would not be seen as democratic. Others, including the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, have said that crucially the new definition risks disproportionately targeting Muslim communities who are already experiencing rising levels of hate and abuse, and said that new definition risks vilifying the wrong people. Zahra Mohammed of the Muslim Council of Britain is also very concerned by the government's proposals, concerned that they are undemocratic, divisive and potentially illegal. The organisation is also concerned by the lack of engagement with some of the groups that the Minister comes here to talk about today. So I ask him when any of the Muslim groups that he mentioned specifically contacted so that they would know that they are in the Minister's statement today. There has been a desperately worrying increase in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism since the 7th of October. It should concern us all that this is happening. We stand against extremism. We stand against the targeting of groups in our society. But this extremism is on the rise, driven in no small part by the culture wars stoked by the Conservatives and their hangers-on, by those who would call peace demonstrations hate marches. And also, as we have heard this week, racism and misogyny by funders of the party of government. Can I ask him if he considers that racism and misogyny meet his definition of extremism, and if he believes that the statement by Frank Hester of Diane Abbott, "You want to hate all black women because she's there, I think she should be shot," would meet his definition of extremism. Well, if he does believe it meets a definition of extremism, will his party return the £10 million, or will he donate it to a charity of Diana's choosing?
Hear, hear.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the points that she makes, and she is quite right to say that we need to be precise, and it is important, as I stressed in my statement, but have the opportunity to stress again, not to conflate the specific challenge from certain Islamist groups with the broader Muslim community. It's absolutely because we need to be precise in order to draw that distinction that we are then able to support organisations on the ground that are seeking to bring people together and to counter anti-Muslim hate and anti-Semitism. Can I also thank her and her colleagues in the Scottish Government for the engagement that we undertook earlier this week through the Interministerial Standing Committee in order to share best practice about how we work with groups on the ground across the United Kingdom who are engaged in this vital counter-extremism work. She refers, of course, to the comments by a gentleman not in this House. Those comments were clearly racist and regrettable. And speaking as someone who was himself targeted by an extremist who was attempting to kill me and who then went on to murder a colleague and friend in this House, I take that sort of language incredibly seriously.
Chair of the Security Committee, Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surely the essential point here is that the government is not proposing to ban any organisation, however extreme, from operating legally and within the law, rather to identify those organisations that should be barred from receiving funding or other support from the government. Now, the government hasn't shared with the Intelligence and Security Committee its proposals, so any point I make now is purely personal to me. But does the Minister agree with me that in any democratic society, there is a right to decide which bodies you will associate with and which you won't? And that is why the Labour Party was quite right to ban no fewer than 7 extreme left organisations since July 2021 from being compatible with Labour Party membership in accordance with values as defined quite properly by its own National Executive Committee.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, who has a very distinguished record in this area, and he is absolutely right. There is appropriately a very high threshold for the prescription of organisations, one which his trio recently met. We are not seeking to ban or to restrict the operation of these organisations in a free society. We are simply making clear that it would be wrong for government to use taxpayers' money or public endorsement in engagement with these organisations.
Chair of the Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the Secretary of State refers to our definition draws on the work of Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent reviewer of social cohesion, and Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, before his appointment to that post. In the Home Affairs Select Committee report on the policing of protests, we said this: we find it surprising that the government have not yet responded to the reports it commissioned from the Commissioner for Countering Extremism regarding hateful extremism, particularly the report Operating with Impunity by Dame Sarah Khan and Sir Mark Rowley. And Sir John Saunders, in his report in 2023, rightly said that the Home Office should respond as a matter of urgency. I'm just wondering, from what's happened today and this moving away from Home Office to DLUC, whether whether the Minister has had any conversations with the Home Office about whether there will be a full response to what Dame Sarah Khan's report set out, and also how this new definition will affect the policing of protests.
Very important points by the Chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and I had the opportunity to meet and discuss our work on this new definition with Dame Sarah and indeed with Sir Mark in preparation. And of course I worked very closely with the Home Secretary and particularly with the Minister for Security in framing the definition. As the Honourable Lady will be aware, work in the space is shared between my department and the Home Office. The Home Office of course deals with security and is responsible for supporting the police. We are responsible for funding community organisations and encouraging a greater degree of social cohesion and resilience. There will be further responses to some of the recommendations in that report, and indeed in Lord Walney's report, and indeed in Dame Sarah's additional report, which will be forthcoming, and I hope that I'll have the opportunity, alongside the Home Secretary, to share further detail in the weeks ahead.
Dame Priti Patel.
Speaker, can I just put on record, first of all, my thanks to Dame Sarah Khan, Sir Mark Rowley and William Shawcross for all the work that they have all done, certainly during my time as Home Secretary in this important area, and of course to the Secretary of State. Now, while these proposals are non-statutory and will act as a guide for civil servants and for ministers, can the Secretary of State share and explain what evidential thresholds will be applied by the new Centre of Excellence when compiling the list of organisations and guidance, and also how this guidance will be applied against existing definitions in law of racism, incitement and intimidation, which clearly are all active right now and obviously guide our security services and our police when it comes to the application and upholding the rule of law.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend who, during her time in the Home Office, initiated and took forward fantastic work in dealing with extremism and intolerance. And she is quite right that the definition does not impinge or alter the legal threshold for prosecution if people are inciting violence. Indeed, there are arguments for looking again at our laws to make sure that they are fit for purpose, but today's definition is not about changing the criminal law. It is about setting a threshold, and that threshold is one that will be evidenced when we come forward with those organisations that we believe meet this bar, with evidence which everyone can see makes a compelling case for the nature of the extremist ideology which spurs those organisations on.
Madam Speaker, the Secretary of State, in my view, very unwisely, recently closed down the interfaith
network, which facilitated the kind of dialogue which he praised in his statement, and he closed it down on the grounds that one of its 22 trustees is connected with the Muslim Council of Britain. If an organisation finds itself unjustly on the list that he proposes, will it have the opportunity to appeal against its inclusion there?
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman, and it wasn't the case that we closed down the Interfaith Network. We ceased funding, and the Interfaith Network draws its funding from a variety of sources. But it is the case that we will apply appropriate due diligence, publish evidence, and of course, if anyone believes that our judgment is wrong, as in any case when government acts and it is believed to be unreasonable, then the option of judicial review is always available.
Robert Buckland.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome my Right Honourable friend's statement. Words matter, and I note in particular the definition about intentionally creating a permissive environment to deal with the harms that he rightly identifies and we all oppose. However, there are dangers in that wording. Will he issue guidance as to what that precisely means? That word intentionally is clearly important. And does he accept from me that there is a danger here that in government generally not engaging with organisations that I think he rightly identifies, that we don't inhibit the work of our security services and agencies in having to engage with elements of these organisations in order to combat extremism at an individual level?
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very, very important point, because it is the case, obviously, that our intelligence and security agencies, law enforcement actors, and indeed sometimes those working abroad to keep us safe, will have to deal with and engage with unsavoury individuals, and the definition does not cover that activity.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let us be clear in this House and call this what it is, Madam Deputy Speaker. What it isn't is a serious and genuine attempt to address a very important issue. What it is, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a further draconian attempt to continue with the Tory agenda of culture wars. And it's disappointing that countless civil liberties groups, including 3 of his own former Home Secretaries, have warned him against politicising such an important issue, but it seems it's fallen on deaf ears. But if the Secretary of State is serious about addressing these issues, let me ask him in this House today to firstly condemn the extremist, vile, dangerous language used by some of his own backbenchers, and to also Tory donors bankrolling his own party.
Yeah, well done. Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, but I hope he will appreciate from the tone between the front benches that both I and the honourable lady are determined not to politicise this, but to make sure that we can operate consensually. Of course, there'll be debate and challenge and difference of opinion and emphasis in what we seek to do, but it's a shared endeavour, and indeed we've been working with independent figures like John Walney, Lord Walney, in order to achieve consensus here. And I'm sorry that he feels that it's necessary to make a party political point about my colleagues. I extend to him the same courtesy that I extend to every member of this House, respecting his mandate and respecting his voice, and not indulging in that sort of unfortunate personalisation.
Robert Jenrick.
My right honourable friend has been consistent and clear-eyed about the threats that we face for a very long time, and I applaud him for that. And he himself has faced personal threats and responded with bravery and resilience, which we all admire. I fear that the definition, though well-intentioned, lands in no man's land, not going far enough to tackle the real extremists, not doing enough to protect the non-extremists, those people who are simply expressing contrarian views, who might find this definition used against them, not perhaps now, but possibly in the future. What reassurance can my right honourable friend give me and others who are concerned about that? And secondly, does he agree with me that this is not the totality of our anti-extremism strategy, important though it is?
We have now to take forward other areas, in particular William Shawcroft's superb recommendations with respect to the PREVENT programme, revoking visas for those people who do not share our values, who are here as visitors, something that appears to have stalled, and ensuring that the police vigorously and fairly implement our existing laws so that everyone can have confidence that there is not and will never be two-tier policing in our country.
Well, again, I thank my right honourable friend who, when he was in the post that I currently hold, took forward immensely valuable work to counter anti-Muslim hatred and anti-Semitism and to support organisations that were fighting both. He asks, is this on its own enough? And of course he's right, it isn't. But it is a necessary step in order to respond indeed to Sir William Shawcross's independent review of PREVENT, where it was clear that the operation of PREVENT was insufficiently rigorous, no criticism of the professionals involved, but insufficiently rigorous because the definition, the rigour of it, needed to be updated, and that is what we do. Of course, he expressed a concern that this definition might be misused. I think it is much less likely that this definition can be misused than the preceding definition, which was looser and baggier and capable of many more interpretations than this much tighter definition. But of course, the proof of that will be in the way in which we set about using it and the evidence we provide to back up any judgments we make.
Joanna Cherry.
This new definition is going to require careful scrutiny for its compliance with human rights, such as the right to freedom of expression, religion and belief, etc. And in my role as chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, I'm delighted that we'll be taking forward that scrutiny next week. But on a personal level, can I ask the Secretary of State to agree with me that members of this House have a duty to be careful in their use of language and not to brand groups extreme or hateful simply because they disagree with them? I want to give an example of that because it's an important and topical example. My friends at LGB Alliance, a well-respected LGBT rights charity, have been described by some members of this House as a hate group, simply because they raised the hitherto unfashionable but now vindicated concerns about the prescription of puberty blockers. So will the Secretary of State join with me in reminding members of this House of their responsibility not to use their positions to stifle legitimate debate, which makes an important contribution to our democracy?
Well, I'm really grateful to the Honourable and Learned Lady for her point. And again, I stress this is about government engagement. And while she or I might agree or disagree with an individual group, we respect their right to free speech and free association. And the points that she makes about the LGB Alliance are well made. Again, it is right that there should be debate on gender and sex questions, and I commend the government for the steps that it's taken to ban puberty blockers. And therefore, I think in this debate, a degree of respect and concern for the very different and heartfelt positions that everyone holds is right. And may I say that her consistent championing of a particular position, though sometimes unpopular with others, is commendable and brave, and she represents the very best of her party.
Kit Malthouse.
Madam Speaker, I'm grateful. I share, along with many other members, some alarm at the emergence of this new definition. And I had two questions broadly for the Secretary of State. First of all, further to the point made by the member from South London, is there really to be no appeal process in this branding of particular groups as unacceptable? Not least because, as he will, I'm sure, intend, putting them on a government blacklist effectively will have a chilling impact more widely on their place in society, from financial services to the media, who is likely to engage with them. So at what stage in the process will those groups that he decides are worthy of examination be able to present evidence in their defence? And secondly, if a member of this House disagrees with the view of the Secretary of State or the government and decides to invite that group into the House or be a member of that group, will the government refuse to engage with the Member of Parliament?
Well, I'm grateful again to my right honourable friend and commend him for the work that he did in the Home Office. During his time there, he will have known that there was an already existing definition, and with that already existing definition, there was an obligation on government not to engage with certain groups. He will also know that while he was there, Sir William Shawcross pointed out that that definition needed to be updated and those engagement principles reinforced. So we're simply doing what, continuing the work that he did so diligently and effectively while at the Home Office. Organisations, I mentioned them earlier, like the British National Socialist Movement and Patriotic Alternative, are organisations which I would hope that no member of this House would want to deal with, but obviously each individual must look to their own conscience about the organisations with which they engage. This is purely about government. Parliament is, quite rightly, sovereign.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Following the point made by the member for Hampshire just now, I urge the Secretary of State to be cautious in all of this, because those of us, for example, that campaigned against apartheid in the 70s were often condemned. The ANC was never banned in Britain, but there were calls to ban it. Things change, history moves on, and those that marched for peace in Ireland were condemned at the time, and later we had the Good Friday Agreement. So I ask the Secretary of State, what is the status of the statement that he's just put before us today? Does it have legal force? Will it be an instruction to the police? Will it be an instruction to local authorities? Exactly how will it be implemented? And on page 5 of his statement, page 5 and 6, he quite rightly makes the point that we have rights of religious assembly, rights of free speech, rights of organisation. Very important to state those. All of those are enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights. Can he assure us, because it's not mentioned anywhere in this document, that there is no plan whatsoever by the government or the Conservative Party to withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights and therefore from the European Court of Human Rights? Because for all its failings and inefficiencies, it does underpin human rights in a very, very important way.
Well, I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for the points that he makes, and his question gives me an opportunity to clarify that we will proceed with caution, and that this definition governs only government engagement and government funding. Other autonomous organisations must and will make their own judgments. This is simply about what government and its agencies do. And he makes the point that, again, people and organisations can change over time. That is true. There are people who have been members of extremist organisations who have changed their view and who have been invaluable in helping us to challenge the work of extremists. Those who were formerly members of Islamist organisations like Hizb ut-Tahrir have been valuable in countering that hate. Those people who were formerly members of neo-Nazi organisations have been invaluable in making sure that we can police their activities. So, of course, it is always within the human heart to have the capacity to change and to reform.
Mr.
Speaker, of course, the first duty of any state is to protect your citizens' national security. And many of us have different experiences of dealing with extremism. I've sat on the Home Affairs Select Committee previously for 3 years dealing with extremism and radicalisation in that regard. And as somebody who comes from a Muslim faith, I get 1,000 pieces of hatred from the far right. And I also get 1,000 pieces of hatred from Islamist Daesh-inspired individuals. I also have a death threat being investigated by Kent Police at the moment, like other members will have their own different experiences. I say this to the Secretary of State. This statement is being made today, after 16 months of this government, our government, not having an independent advisor to tackle Islamophobia. This statement is also being made after 2 weeks ago, the government-funded body Tal Mama published data to say there was 2,000 pieces of hate incidents or crimes against the Muslim community. And we haven't had a statement from the government at all on engagement with the Muslim community. So the question I ask the Secretary of State is this. People will be looking at this statement with that backdrop in mind, and I want him to clarify to me today, with regards to the interpretation of this definition. Am I right that it will be a minister who will be making the determination if something is intolerant, is a permissive environment, or if it's intolerant? A government minister will be making that determination. No disrespect to current government ministers or future government ministers, but giving ministers that responsibility, I think, raises real concern because it comes down to each minister's own judgment. And this matter needs to make sure that we have a thorough, independent, fair process because we are all committed to our national security.
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman who has endured the consequences of extremism himself and who's been a very valuable voice for religious freedom for many years now. He makes two important points. The need to be vigilant in dealing with anti-Muslim hatred, and that is why my right honourable colleague, the Security Minister, announced more than £100 million worth of funding in order to better protect mosques and to better protect schools and other Muslim community centres. I commend that initiative. It is also why the government continues to fund the excellent organisation Tell Mama, whose founder I had the opportunity to meet again yesterday in order to discuss the approach that we are taking. He asks, is it the case that ministers alone make the judgment? Ministers will make that judgment informed by impartial civil service advice and academic research.
John McDonnell.
For a number of years I've been meeting with and working with an organisation that published in 2018 its report, Our Shared British Future, Muslims and Integration in the UK. I supported that report because it called for equal integration to all, breaking down barriers, working towards tackling challenges, hindering integration. It called for the celebration of British diversity, celebrate the success of our model of integration, and also reported on the role of faith integration organisations in integration to recognise faith can support integration efforts. That organisation is the Muslim Council of Britain. The Secretary of State deprecated the leaks around this report. Well, the informal spin and briefings that have taken place have dragged the name of the Muslim Council of Britain through the mud in recent days. He hasn't fairly answered the question about what appeal process will be taking place apart from judicial review. Will organisations, therefore, and individuals have access to legal aid for judicial review in challenging decisions by the Secretary of State on this?
I think it was the Labour government when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister that raised concerns about some of the activities and views expressed by members of the Muslim Council of Britain, but any organisation which has concerns raised is an organisation that we will be very, very careful in scrutinising before taking any steps. And when we do take any steps, if we take any steps, the evidence will be clearly laid out.
Miriam Kate.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I absolutely support my right honourable friend's aims in making this statement in terms of protecting our democracy and protecting us from violence and threats and the kind of terrorist threats that we've seen over recent weeks. But I do share the concerns that many honourable members have made that in separating the definition of extremism from actual violence and harm, and using terms like fundamental rights, which don't actually have a definition in law, we do risk criminalising, or at the very least chilling the speech of, people who have perfectly legitimate, harmless views. And I just want to go back to the example of gender-critical feminists. So a gender-critical feminist might be intolerant of the rights of people to change their sex on their birth certificate. They might be seeking to undermine that right by seeking to repeal the Gender Recognition Act, for example. They would be labelled extremists under these regulations, as I can see it. And as to impartial civil servants deciding these things, I'm afraid I just don't think that's always the case. And certainly I have seen civil servants wearing very unimpartial lanyards on this particular issue. So I just seek his reassurance that not only will these groups not be labelled extremists now, but there will be protections that they could never be labelled so in future.
Grateful to the Honourable Lady. It's precisely because I share her concerns that we've made the definition tighter. I'm sure she's aware of the already existing wording of the 2011 definition, which has a far broader range of groups which could fall within its ambit. By being more narrow, more precise and more rigorous, we more effectively protect free speech. She referred to criminalising. Let's be clear, there's nothing in this which would lead to a ban. It is simply about saying which organisations government should and should not engage with. And I'm sure she would agree with me that neo-Nazi organisations and Islamist organisations of the kind that I drew attention to are the kinds of organisations that government should not be engaging with, and it was regrettable in the past that we have.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government's independent reviewer of terrorism, Jonathan Hall, and the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann, have both criticised what they've learned of these outline proposals for a new non-statutory definition of extremism. Jonathan Hall points out that Hizb ut-Tahrir was proscribed under the Terrorism Act for its reaction to the 7th of October attacks, quite rightly. And he said proposals would mark a shift from doing bad things to thinking bad things. Lord Mann points to contradictions between banning some speakers from universities while having just passed a law to enshrine the freedom of speech in universities. And he talks about the politics of division doing nothing to help the Jewish community. Will the Secretary of State be reflecting on the advice of the government's independent reviewer of terrorism and its independent advisor on anti-Semitism?
Well, I met them both in the preparation of the work that we've done today, and I think it was the case that the independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann, whose work is outstanding, said on broadcast today that he regarded this as an improvement on the existing definition. So I'm grateful for that support and for the honourable gentleman's question and the opportunity for me to relay that to the House.
Sir Edward Lee.
I'm worried about this. Will my honourable friend reassure me that nothing in this statement is going to add to the increasing culture in what should be a free country of the intolerance of the right to offend? I mean, I may be offended if people make extreme attacks on Christianity. They have an absolute right to do so, and people have a right to criticise religious people or particular religions. Equally, Orthodox Jews or devout evangelical Christians with a particular view of the Bible or devout traditional Muslims have an absolute right to say what they believe in a free society, even if it's very unfashionable.
I couldn't agree more. It's the principle of Milton's Areopagitica that govern my approach towards free speech, that ideas should contend on the plane of argument, and that people should be able to discern good arguments from bad arguments. All that this statement does is to tighten the existing definition. The concerns that my right honourable friend raises about definitions being used to marginalise speech, I think existed with the previous definition to an extent. Now, with this tighter definition, and also with the fact that the government will publish the reasons why it chooses not to engage with a group, things could be clearer. And as I say, it's purely about government engagement and financing. And I know that he, like me, would want to make sure that taxpayers' money was stewarded wisely.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This tweet was liked by Sir Paul Marshall. Civil war is coming. There has never been a country that has remained peaceful with a sizable Islamic presence. Once the Muslims get to 15 to 20% of the population, the current cold civil war will turn hot. Many other incendiary tweets were liked or retweeted by Marshall, a substantial donor to both the Tory party and the Secretary of State personally, according to a recent Hope Not Hate newsagent's investigation. How does the Secretary of State square his definition of extremism with accepting money from someone like Marshall?
Well, I deprecate the personal attack on Sir Paul Marshall, who is a distinguished philanthropist and the supporter of ARC academies, which are state schools that have done so much, including in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, to improve the lives of disadvantaged children from a variety of minority backgrounds.
Mark Logan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, last evening in the House of Commons, I attended the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims' big iftar celebration, and one person after another said to me in private that they were fearful of an increasing mood of Islamophobia. Indeed, my friend on this side of the House had referred to the Tel Mama statistics, where since October there's been a 335% increase in anti-Muslim hatred. What I'm worried about is a slippery slope, and although I commend what the Secretary of State said today in terms of it's just looking at community engagement, but can we be assured that this is not a slippery slope in months and years ahead, which will lead to a position across the criminal law where people do not feel that they're able to speak their mind anymore? And I take the example of 2-3 weeks ago in my own constituency. I attended a rally in support of Gaza, but of course we've seen in recent months that that's almost been outlawed, or people have been silenced from doing that. So can the Secretary of State give those commitments that this will not be the commencement of a slippery slope? And I say that, again, as someone who's grew up in Northern Ireland and has grew up in an environment of terrorism, and I know that it's very easy whenever you think that you're putting one person away, that you end up with 1,000 enemies behind them.
I'm again very grateful to my honourable friend, whose experience not only in Northern Ireland but working abroad to promote peace and inclusion is to be commended. And he's quite right. It's the department which I currently lead which funds Tel Mama, which does such important work in highlighting and recording acts of anti-Muslim hatred. There's been a dreadful increase in them. We want to work with organisations on the ground to counter that hatred. It is the case, as I mentioned, that some of the organisations that have been supported in the past sadly have been extremist and have been seeking to intimidate British Muslims, and that is why we need to be careful with whom we work in order to present a united front against anti-Muslim hatred.
George Galloway.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's quite clear that there's a shared endeavour going on between the two front benches, but as questions have continued, it's quite clear there's unease on both sides of the House on the back benches, and for very good reasons. It is obviously true that this is part of a culture war wallpaper that's being created for the general election soon to come. It's not good enough to say that it doesn't seek to ban or jail anyone. You try getting a bank account once you've been branded by Michael Gove as an extremist. Now, extremism, if we were debating this in the Oxford Union, as once we did in his salad days, on another matter, we'd all be talking about what's the definition. I just remind the Secretary that a former Speaker of this House was wearing a Hang Nelson Mandela t-shirt when my right honourable friend and I were seeking the overthrow of apartheid and being called divisive. This building is designed to show that politics is full of division, and sometimes those reviled as extremists turn out to have been right all along.
Can I first of all congratulate the Honourable Member on his election as Member of Parliament for Rochdale. As he quite rightly points out, we have known each other for several decades, and during that time I have always admired his oratorical skills and the passion with which he makes his case. There's nothing in this definition that any Honourable Member should fear will inhibit them from making their case, and while I passionately disagree with the Honourable Gentleman on so many issues, he has the same rights as every other member of this House and deserves to be listened to with respect as he makes his case.
Sir Desmond Sway.
By stating that a free society requires that the Muslim religion accommodate itself to the same level of scrutiny, criticism, even blasphemy, as Christianity has become accustomed to, am I straying into his permissive environment? I'm not an extremist, am I?
My right honourable friend is many, many things. Learned, wise, kind, a champion of the New Forest, and a distinguished former educationist. He is not an extremist, and the rigour with which he prosecutes his case is one I will continue to admire.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I share my right honourable friend's concern that government departments may have been engaging with extremists and racists in the past. Now, the Secretary of State seemed to indicate that this engagement or lack of engagement is dependent on the definition. Isn't it also dependent on the common sense of ministers? And if ministers are willing to engage with extremists and racists, surely they shouldn't be ministers in the first place.
I absolutely take his point, and the key thing here is that sometimes there are organisations that seek to operate, as I mentioned, and individuals that seek to operate by presenting one face to one group and a different face to another, and that is why we need appropriate due diligence. Mistakes have been made in the past. I think those mistakes were made in good faith and unwittingly. But as has been pointed out, across this House, a number of people have expressed their concern about those past errors. That is why I think we need a tighter and more precise definition.
Andrew Rosendale.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I commend the government on what they are attempting to do to oppose and fight all forms of extremism and hatred in our country. But will he agree with me that what underpins Britain is our ancient liberties and freedoms, free speech, the rule of law, upholding our democracy under the Crown? And does he believe, as I do, that we must defend all of our British values and traditions, we must teach them in schools, and we must ensure that British values are the order of the day?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very, very important point, and I do think it is the case that in our schools and in other institutions we should make sure that people from every background are acquainted with our history and taught the very British habits of scepticism and questioning, and sometimes raucous expressions of opposition to governments and others. That spirit of democratic challenge is core to this country, and no one better exemplifies being able to speak out without fear or favour than my honourable friend.
Hannah.
The press release attached to this statement, deliberately or otherwise, by reference to the period since the 7th of October, does seem to imply that protest and other human responses to the horrors of Hamas's attacks on Israel and the bombardment of Gaza are extreme. In my diverse and shared South Belfast constituency, we are battling extremism at the moment in the form of a rash of menacing and racist posters about foreigners and housing, and it is my genuine belief that that rhetoric is being fanned by this government, a government of a party who are funded by a person who says that they hate all black women. It is worth mentioning that the Northern Ireland office ministers met with representative paramilitaries during their negotiations on the withdrawal agreement. Politics like this and the departure from pluralism and tolerance are part of the reason why I and many others advocate a new Ireland by exclusively peaceful and democratic means. That would, of course, undermine and change the constitution of the United Kingdom and its democracy. Can the Minister confirm that people like me who advocate a new Ireland are not extremists under the second part of his definition?
No, of course not. The SDLP has a long and proud tradition of arguing for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to become a new state, and that has, as I say, an impeccable political tradition. It is the case, of course, that, as she quite rightly points out, there are many people who wish to protest about what is happening in the Middle East. We may disagree about aspects of that conflict, but a sincere desire to bring peace to the Middle East is one I hope that we all share, and the regrettable incidence of prejudice in the streets of South Belfast is one that we all deprecate.
James Sunderland.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I welcome the clear statement today, and it is right that we openly debate and tackle extremism in this place. At this time of tension and sensitivity, does the Secretary of State agree with me that politicians do have a responsibility to dial down the rhetoric, that divisions must not be exploited for political gain, and that we all just need to work together across the House to achieve it?
I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend, and his distinguished career of public service, even before he entered this House, has shown a commitment to working across divides in order to strengthen our democracy.
Deputy Speaker, he spoke of sharing workings about affected organisations. He didn't share workings after the abrupt decision he took to pull government funding from the Interfaith Network, causing that respected organisation to close. How does he explain that contradiction between his words and his recent actions?
A letter was published outlining the reasoning behind that, and the government is only one of a number of funders of the Interfaith Network.
Tom Hunt.
Deputy Speaker, I don't want to be accused of dialling up the rhetoric, but I must say I and millions of people in this country are utterly fed up of these protests which have been taking place in our nation's capital. Not every person who attends these protests are an extremist. Not every person who attends it are radicals, but many are. And they are going unchallenged. I've got Jewish friends who won't go into their own capital because they don't feel safe, and it's weekend after weekend after weekend. When is something going to happen? All Republic see is impotence. And it is fueling extremism. It is linked to that debate. And frankly, if it doesn't get any better, and we continue to see hate on our streets unchallenged, will the government be prepared to strip responsibility for policing in London from the Mayor of London and give a far stronger steer to the Metropolitan Police, who every weekend, from what I can see, are failing to stand up for our values and for Jewish people to feel safe?
Well, my honourable friend speaks passionately about this, and I know myself from talking to Jewish friends that they do consider some of the statements and actions that accompany these marches to cause them to feel a profound sense of fear, and that's been well recorded by not just the government's Commission for Countering Extremism, but by members of this House. So I do share the concern that he has for the Jewish community. I should say that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner takes his responsibilities very seriously, and there have been a number of arrests alongside these marches, and individuals have been prosecuted for incitement and for hateful actions. I would also say that my colleagues in the Home Office have commissioned a report from Lord Walney, John Woodcock, as was, looking at how we effectively give the police all the powers they need, and we will be coming forward in due course with a response to that report.
Bishop Bergen.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm afraid that the statement has not assuaged the fears that so many have about what the government is really up to here. Given recent events on which the Secretary of State was remarkably silent in his actual statement, can I ask, shouldn't someone saying an MP should be shot count as extremist, or are those who have donated £10 million to the Conservative Party exempted from such definitions? And wouldn't the Tory party be better off getting its own house in order rather than making this clearly political intervention, which is more about the upcoming general election and the attempt to silence the huge numbers of peaceful opponents of the government's Gaza policy than it does with public safety?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, as someone who was the victim of a determined effort to, kill me, and because the individual who was trying to kill me then went on to kill a friend and colleague in this House, I take incredibly seriously threats of violence. And the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington is someone whom I've long admired, and those comments were disgusting. I absolutely no hesitation in stating that. But the intention of bringing forward this definition today is to make sure that government and government alone ensures that it works with organisations committed to peace and committed to greater social cohesion. And I hope that, on reflection, he will recognise that we can work together in order to deal with those hateful extremists whose actions we both, I'm sure, deprecate.
Anna Furr.
Mr Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend will understand that the people of Southend West will welcome his statement and appreciate his commitment to tackling extremism. But they also know that the devil is not just in the detail, but in the enforcement. And they have seen their parliament with anti-Semitic slogans from the river to the sea projected on it, which, if are not already against the law, certainly should be, and they've seen the police take insufficient action. We've also had anti-Middle East war marches in Southend with fake dolls covered in white bandages, spattered with red substance, with placards around saying Anna Firth kills babies. Now, both of those actions are clearly, I would say, if they're not extreme, they are very close to being within his definition of extremism. So can he assure me and this House that we will make sure that the message as to what is extremism and what is against the law gets through to the police and the appropriate action is taken?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely correct to draw attention to the fact that there have been occasions recently when people motivated to make a particular point have crossed a threshold, and I know that the police take these transgressions incredibly seriously, as does my right honourable friend, the Security Minister and the Home Secretary.
Sam Tarry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As over the past week, as we've sort of meandered towards this statement, much of it played out in the press, definitions and various organisations potentially being named as being prescribed. I'm wondering how my constituents in Ilford South can have any faith in the Secretary of State to decide who is or isn't an extremist. And the reason I ask that question is because it's also been briefed that his preferred appointment as the anti-Muslim hatred advisor is Haras Rafiq. And Mr Deputy Speaker, this is the former CEO of the Quilliam Foundation, which worked with US anti-Muslim think tanks and promoted the favourite theory of Nick Griffin, the Great Replacement theory, a conspiracy theory that is so far debunked to an extreme, it should be nowhere near the Secretary of State's thinking. And yesterday, and most damningly, Tommy Robinson, a far-right extremist that everyone in this House knows who he is, actually praised that appointment. So, Secretary of State, how can my constituents have faith that the decisions you will be making are not actually politicised?
Because we will publish the evidence behind them.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome this statement today. But there is one issue that we have to look at, and that is that organisations are populated by individuals. Those individuals will have these hate-filled views and may either be expelled by those organisations or alternatively go off and form other organisations that won't be on the banned list. Equally, as the Right Honourable Lady opposite raised during her point, it is individuals that seek to radicalise young people, either from abroad or in the UK. So what action is my right friend going to be taking to ensure that foreign nationals who seek to radicalise our young people are prevented from doing so?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point, and indeed it was a point that was made in a related way by my right honourable friend, the member for Newark. And it is the case, I know, that the Home Office is vigilant about who it allows to come here and conducts appropriate work in order to ensure that visas are not granted to people who are here to disseminate or sow division and hate.
Stuart Hosey.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. We know from the work of the ISC under the leadership of the Secretary's right honourable friend from New Forest East in the report on extreme right-wing terrorism that there are a number of people who are radicalised not simply by shadowy organisations or the dark web, but in part at least by the mainstream media. So how does the Secretary of State see his statement today and his definition of the creation of a permissive environment? I'm thinking judges, enemies of the people. How does he see his statement today and the definitions intersecting with the mainstream media?
Well, I think that all of us have a responsibility to be vigilant about the dangers of extremism, and I'm grateful to many media outlets for shining a light on extremism, from the BBC to the Times newspaper. I know he mentions one particular newspaper headline. He may disagree with it or find it objectionable, but I think the most important thing to recognise is that a vigorous culture of free speech sustained by a free and independent press is a critical part of our democratic culture.
I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement today and for responding to questions for an hour and 13 minutes. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on. We will start with the motion on the supplementary estimate for the Department for Education and the debate on the spending of the Department for Education on special educational needs and disabilities provision. The debate will be led by Robin Walker. Minister, to move the motion formally.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. Robin Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to colleagues on the Liaison Committee and the Backbench Business Committee for supporting my application for this debate and to giving it the prominent position it has got today. I want to thank all of those who supported the application and note that it's an unusual subject that brings together the Right Honourable Gentleman for Hayes and Harlington, my Right Honourable Friend for Houghton, Price and Howden, the Honourable Lady for Twickenham and the Honourable Gentleman for Strangford. Not all of them can be here today, but I know that each has passionately supported the case for more and better targeted investment to support children with special needs. I warmly welcome the Honourable Lady for Wellingborough to her chamber today, and I have to say I think it's greatly to her credit that she has chosen to make her maiden speech on this subject. I look forward to hearing it. Mr Deputy Speaker, I make no apology that the subject for this debate is not new ground for the House. I know that there have been many debates on the importance of SEND over the last few years, green papers, a command paper, and the excellent backbench business debate under the auspices of my Right Honourable Friend for Houghton, Price and Howden, which was so well subscribed. It's no surprise to me that we see today's debate is similarly well supported across the chamber. I don't intend to repeat all the arguments in that previous debate, and I know 30 members spoke in it, but I hope the Minister will take them all as read for his response. In my casework as MP for Worcester and in the evidence I've seen as Chair of the Education Select Committee, there is a consistent trend of schools of every phase and variety struggling to meet a rising level of SEND need, of families struggling to get the needs of their children properly met and supported, and of children with SEN too often being home educated, not as a result of genuine elective home education, but as a result of their parents feeling there is no other way in which their needs can be supported. We have heard this at the Select Committee described as non-elective home education. Happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, and he's making a really important debate that he's managed to secure here. One of the things that's really strongly coming across to me in Derbyshire is that one of the big problems is the lack of capacity within the local authority to actually do the assessment. So there's many schools that are supporting parents and their special needs children, but are unable to, for months,